Boom. All right. Twitter for politics. It's going to be amazing. Twitter has never been as vast or as large as other social media platforms, but it has always played an outsized role in media and culture. And especially for our purposes, when we're engaging with the news or working in politics, Twitter could not be a more important platform for all of us. That is for sure. And that's why we're here today. And like I said earlier, and as people are tuning in right now, I'm certainly aware of everything that's happening as in regards to Twitter today. Certainly a lot of egregious missteps by them as it relates to this Hunter Biden story, I would say, in my opinion. But nevertheless, we're going to proceed on. Happy to entertain or field questions about censorship and things of that nature as we go through this training. And the last thing I'll say, that's the housekeeping item that I quickly forgot, is that if you have any questions at any point, we're all in the chat function now. Always feel free to use that chat function to slow me down, ask any specific questions. I really don't leave too much time at the end for questions. I just like to take them as they come. And I might just push them because it might be in a couple lecture slides later, but otherwise we're gonna get every question you have about Twitter answered here today. But before we hop into Twitter, I just wanna introduce Leadership Institute really quickly, myself, and then we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes. First and foremost, welcome to a Leadership Institute training. Hello on behalf of Leadership Institute. For those of us that are new, for those of us that are not new, welcome back. We're always happy to have you. And as you can tell on the screen, our graduates get called a lot of names, but luckily they're all pretty good names. And essentially what we do, Leadership Institute, we increase the number and effectiveness of conservative activists in the public policy process. We were founded about 41 years ago now in 1979 by our founder and current president, Morton C. Blackwell, and the extra bedroom of his home has grown into an amazing, very large nonprofit in this world and in this space, that's for sure. And ultimately, we teach conservatives the nuts and bolts of how to succeed in the public policy process. We are laser focused on political technology. And political technology is a lot like Twitter, right? You could be tweeting on behalf of Bernie Sanders or on behalf of Ted Cruz, but you still have to know how to write the tweet and how to compose it, right? And we are laser focused on political technology and making sure that conservatives specifically are equipped with the tools to succeed. That is for sure. And our IRS overlords classify us as a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization, which of course means that we have an open admissions policy. While we try and train conservatives, everyone's welcome here. There's no litmus test. If you're here, welcome. And we don't support or oppose any candidates or legislation. So no politicians and no policy. But while we work through Twitter, we are going to be examining specific politicians' Twitter accounts, but really only from the political technology standpoint. It's not an endorsement of that particular politician because we're using them as an example, but rather because they may be doing something really correct or really incorrect along the way. But lastly, I just want to introduce myself and then we'll get into Twitter. For those of us that have not met me before, well, I'm happy we're going to meet right now and I'm happy this is happening right now. My name is Stephen Rowe, like I said earlier. I am the Director of Digital Training at Leadership Institute, and I'm originally from the great state of Montana. And it's my favorite talking point. The first time you ever meet me in person, I'll probably say the same thing. I'm Stephen from Montana. I love bringing it up. Not a lot of people from Montana, so hopefully I'm a good representative of my state for the next about 7 years is when you run into a Montanan. So until 2027, hopefully I'm a good representative, a good ambassador of the great state of Montana. There's only 1 million people total in the entire state, but we're the 4th largest geographically speaking. So it is pretty interesting to see kind of how that pans out. But ultimately it breaks down to a 3-to-1 ratio with just 1 million people. And that's 3 cows for every human. And there were 7 black guys in Montana before I left. And well, now there's 6, but it really is a beautiful state. You get the chance to go. I couldn't recommend it more. One last pitch on Montana, because no one else will ever pitch you on Montana, so I figure I'll just throw it out there right now, is nestled in the Rocky Mountain Range, hidden in the great state of Montana, is the best national park that I believe the United States has to offer, and it's called Glacier National Park. It's jaw-dropping beautiful, truly spectacular, and I couldn't recommend you visit more. It's just north of Missoula, and it's just really beautiful stuff. It's the stuff you see on postcards. It's really cool stuff. Robert just said, can you ride a horse? Yes, I definitely can ride a horse. And I think we're all familiar with this, and I'm oversharing. I'm going to push off myself in just a second, but because of the question, when the hit song came out, Old Town Road came out, I mean, that's just like me in a nutshell. You know, this black guy from Montana who lives in the city now. Yeah, I still got my horseback riding skills, that is for sure. But yeah, like I said, I'm the director of digital training. One of the cool things about being able to administer digital training is I get to reach so many people from across the country and across the world. And I really encourage you to lean on us if there's any other gap, so to speak, in your armor, your digital armor, right? Some of us may need to learn how to do video production a little bit more. Others may need to learn how to code or potentially how to make graphics in Photoshop. We have a very robust training program. Really encourage you to look towards LI's digital training in the future. And one last small plug on that is we just launched a new series every Tuesday at noon Eastern time. We're launching a digital download weekly training series. Our first inaugural one was this past Tuesday on how to make memes. This next one coming up is going to be on intro to cybersecurity. Then from there, we're going to go to Snapchat for politics. I mean, we're exploring all those random smaller topics in about an hour. And the training is always free. It's every Tuesday. It's the digital download training series. And finally, if you want to stay connected with me during this training or beyond, I have students reach out to me in my DMs all the time. That's my social media handle for you. You know, we're on a Twitter class right now, so my Twitter handle is there, obviously. Feel free to follow me. I'll follow you back. If you're in this course right now, we'll do the follow back. I mean, that's how much I love you. But yes, so everything's at Robots, ROWEBOTZ. And it's Robots because I'm in tech. If I was a rapper, I was going to go by the name Death Row. I think that would have been pretty cool. But unfortunately, I don't have mad bars. I'm just good with computers. So Robots it is for now. Christopher just said, now following Stephen Rowe on Twitter. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And Dominic just said, is Tuesday's training on memes available online? It is not available online, but is available as a recording, Dominic. And I'm just going to write your name down and send that to you right now for the How to Make Memes presentation. Got you. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're here. We're here. Twitter for Politics. Let's jump into all of the good stuff that we have to talk about. And the way the structure of the training is going to go is first, we're just going to go through some basics, the fundamentals of what everything is. We're starting from ground zero. And then we're actually going to build from there into some best practices. And then we're actually going to hop into my Twitter account and work through Twitter as a platform. And you'll be able to explore it from a verified Twitter account's perspective. So I've got the blue check mark. Gordon Ramsay follows me. Ivanka Trump follows me. So you should too. You should too. But yeah, it'll be really cool. I think it's always interesting to see, you know, a bigger Twitter account's back end. I will say mine is a little bit more dormant these days because I'm more of an Instagram, TikToker now as I explore new social media platforms. But Twitter is still very close to my heart. That is for sure. Awesome, John. I got Jay Webb and John. I got you as well. Great. So let's go at the very beginning. And as we do, we're going to start with the definitions. Hold on one second. Awesome. So let's start with the definitions. This is just like, you know, basketball players that are dribbling, even though they're playing a championship, right? And why soccer players are still practicing taking shots at the goal, because the fundamentals really matter. That is for sure. So first and foremost, from a theory perspective, why does Twitter fit so well with everything that's happening in culture and in politics? Well, first, there's the media angle, and then there's us, right? And from the media angle, the desire to break news first naturally fits on Twitter and incredibly well. I mean, it's pretty organic how it fits. Twitter is the happening now platform, and in addition to being able to break news, the media, in addition to that, is allowed to easily source real-time news, looking through the tweets, looking through the hashtags, looking through the trends, and find the stories that people want to read or learn more about. And the natural fit for us as activists is we ultimately have a natural desire to talk about things, right? And Twitter operates to a large extent like an online watering hole, except everyone has the same voice that can kind of pitch in at some points, it feels like sometimes. But it's a natural desire to talk about news. And Twitter is one of the easier ways for our perspective. For anybody who would call themselves a news junkie or, you know, a political junkie, then of course Twitter is a natural fit for you because you're getting all the news quickly. And that is one of the better elements of it. And these are the benefits of it, right? Of Twitter, first and foremost, is the immediacy, right? Everything can happen right now. And as you tweet, people can start to engage with that information and make decisions based on that information. Of course, the next key benefit, and this is what separates it from platforms like Facebook, is reach. because you have an incredible amount of reach as just a single user. You know, in the world of Facebook, we'll pick on them for a second. You have to create a Facebook group to, you know, go past your 5,000 friends. You have to have a Facebook page if you want to go past your 5,000 friends. But on Twitter, almost anybody can be can grow their Twitter following to a point where they can reach all of their followers, and it's a much larger number. You're not going to be capped out by 5,000 followers, but rather you're capped out by your, you know, quality content and the amount of people that want to follow you. So it's pretty cool. The reach is very pervasive. You have a very large amount of reach on Twitter, much more than I would say on more social media networks, especially as you grow on Twitter as a platform. And then the third key benefit is that it has the ability to discover new people and information. And that's really where it helps from that, you know, that immediacy angle. But more than that, now we can take action on that information to connect with additional individuals and find additional information. And one of the bigger things that I'll say at the beginning too is, you know, the people that I see that succeed on Twitter certainly understand these three key benefits. And one of the better things that I've seen of successful Twitter accounts is you kind of find your tribe, so to speak. You find your niche, you find your area on Twitter. And if you combine these three things with a powerful niche, you're going to have a lot of success on the platform. But Twitter has what we call a Twitter effect. Like I said, we see the immediacy, we see the ability to talk to new people, we see the reach, and that's why it is a powerful tool for not just people in politics, but traders and investors, right? Let's imagine just for a second that Elon Musk, who does tweet often, but let's imagine for a second that Elon Musk tweeted out something big about Tesla or about SpaceX or something of that nature. Well, if we are quick on that information, that may be a key indicator of where the stock market is going to go or how that particular company is going to perform, things of that nature. And so we can see that happen time and time again for traders and investors. Having that knowledge first in that world, especially, is just incredibly powerful, financially speaking, but it also applies to politics as well. And Twitter is faster than print, it's faster than TV, and it's faster than the newswire. Gone are the days of us waiting until 6 o'clock to watch Bill O'Reilly for a couple reasons, but rather we know exactly what the trending topics of the day are going to be, right? And so we don't have to wait till 6 p.m. to see what the news of the day is, right? We can log on to Twitter and immediately know what these evening talk shows are going to be discussing. I mean, that's the power of Twitter, and that really is the Twitter effect. There we go. And then next, as the media and the media's perspective, as CNN political reporter Peter Hamby has aptly noted, Twitter has replaced the campaign bus as a place where political reporters swap information and where media narratives develop. And this is so true. I mean, we don't have to look much further back than the last presidential debate, right, between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Now, before these two men got off the stage, right? And this is where it was in the back in you know 2004 and before, right? Where you get off the stage and you go find a camera to your favorite media station and start spinning, right? It was called the spin room, right? But rather, we live in a world now where the spin is happening in real time. And so before these people get off the stage, there's armies of people, literally about probably 50 to 100 people on each side that are participating on Twitter, that are live tweeting the event, that are doing their best to shape reactions and shape the news narrative. That is for sure. And it's pretty interesting to see as a whole. Robert just asked, how long will this presentation last? Do I need to skip my dialysis? Well, hopefully not. And actually, this brings me up to a good point before I move on to the next slide. We are going to take 2 breaks. That was the last housekeeping thing I forgot. We're going to take 2 breaks at the top of the hour. So from 2 to 2:05 p.m. and from 3 to 3:05 p.m. we're going to take 2 5-minute breaks. So hopefully not too long. There we go. And that's a good thing to note for everybody. So I'm glad that was brought up. So next big thing, here's just an article of when the White House hates your tweet. And this was a article that came out in 2014 that is still so relevant in 2020. And here's why. Let's think about this for a second. The White House, right? The White House, which is arguably one of the most informationally powerful, certainly the most militarily powerful, or the U.S. government as a whole has all of these things working for them, right? And amidst having, you know, the CIA and the NSA and the TSA and all of these government organizations, the way that they are able to source and the way that they do source often information is literally from Twitter as well, which really highlights again how pervasive Twitter is in our culture. And it is very relevant. I mean, it's pretty important, pretty crazy to see that even the White House is doing this. And so this article was describing what they did for the Obama White House in 2014 was their press people would source and scour Twitter before the press briefings. So they knew what the reporters were going to ask ahead of time and hopefully have some prepared responses. Again, that's still the case here today. And Twitter, again, being at the forefront of news spreading, even before the US government in some instances. So just real quickly, how do we get to where we are? How did this grow for those of us that haven't been following Twitter for very long? Well, it all started in March of 2006. That's when Twitter was born. This is the current founder and majority president. I think it was like 51% of Twitter. His name's Jack Dorsey. He's just setting up his Twitter. At the time, Twitter did not have any vowels, which is why there's no I's and no E's in that Twitter. From there, it moved quickly. In 2007, about a year into its inception, is when Twitter introduced hashtags. This happened at a WordPress developer conference called Barcamp, which is why they're asking hashtag Barcamp, which is the name of that WordPress developer conference. But this is when they first introduced the idea of centralizing conversation and using hashtags online, which is pretty cool to see. And if you don't know exactly what a hashtag is, we'll get to definitions in just a second. No worries at all. But let's fast forward 2 more years, and all of a sudden we see that Twitter becomes the mainstay, the place for breaking news on the World Wide Web. And we all probably remember this story. And as you can see from Janice, who covered it, there's a plane in the Hudson. I'm on the ferry going to pick up people right now. We all saw or remember, in case we don't, there was a plane that had to make an emergency crash landing in the Hudson Bay in New York City. Now, before this was seen to the world through news stations, again in 2009, this was on Twitter. And if you wanted to get the information there, you wanted to get the information first, you had to be on Twitter to do that. And since then, it's nonstop. There's many accolades, very famous milestones of when Twitter has broken very pertinent and relevant information. Here's one of the more big ones that's happened in our past. So I'm told by a reputable person that they have killed Osama bin Laden. Hot damn. And this tweet went out before President Obama made his speech saying that we got him, we got bin Laden. Again, if you had a Twitter account, you would have known exactly what he was going to say ahead of time, and really placing Twitter at the forefront of breaking news first. This made Twitter very popular, right? And all of a sudden in 2010, the Library of Congress actually decided that we're going to do our best to acquire the entire Twitter archive, and every tweet we're going to try and save, right? And because obviously these important milestones are happening on Twitter. But what we quickly found is that that's quite impossible to catalog the internet in a very comprehensive way. The best we have is Google. And of course, a government system has failed. And this is no shortage of a government system failing. The Library of Congress actually had to scrap that project. The Twitter archive did not work out. That is for sure. But anyway, some other cool milestones that have happened along the way, bringing us here to where we are now in 2020. Since 2009 to 2020, we're able to upload rich media, aka photos and videos, and even the video length that we're able to upload has gotten longer. The ability of us to tweet went from 140 characters to 280 characters. So if you feel like you don't have a lot of space now, it used to be way worse back in the past, that's for sure. Of course, now we can link to video live streaming. Twitter famously acquired a couple social media platforms earlier on in its inception. One of the biggest ones being Vine, if we remember that. There were the 6-second short videos. It was around for about a year and a half, till Twitter bought it. Twitter also bought one called Periscope, and now you can live stream essentially on Twitter, which is pretty cool. And then in addition to that, one of the cooler things that exists now on Twitter that I think is especially relevant for all of us here today is that we have really good analytics on Twitter. You can dive into your tweets, see exactly what's happening, where your audience is, who they are, and when they're online, and of course begin to optimize for that over time. And that's a very powerful thing. So analytics is especially relevant. And of course, the other milestone here in 2020 on October 15th is that they already were, but now they're aggressively attacking conservatives on their platform. I just got thrown a little jest right there. But let's go through some Twitter terms just in case we're not all on the same page. These won't take too long, but just so we're all on the same page. So first and foremost, when you post on Twitter, that process is called a tweet, right? And that's a post on Twitter. And when you are tweeting or you're going to tweet, then you are writing that post on Twitter, right? And if you're tweeting at somebody, that means you are writing a post including somebody else in your conversation. And that's really the gist of it, is when we say tweet, all we're saying is post, and it just means Twitter specific. And the next big thing that we have on Twitter is we're able to follow and unfollow people. And one of the good things I'll say here too, that's really important for people that are getting started, is a lot of people are concerned about their follower to following ratio. And you should be. I think it's a really relevant metric. It's super important for a lot of reasons, depending on what you're doing. If you're a journalist, I definitely see yourself following as many people as you have followers. That ratio matters a little bit less. If you're a brand or you're a celebrity, you obviously want to have way more followers than the people that you're following. There's different use cases for every circumstance, but one of the best pieces of advice that I have for people getting started is don't be afraid to unfollow people. You're not gonna, you're not upsetting any feelings, and we're gonna move on with our lives. It's gonna be better for everybody. Don't be afraid to click unfollow. Especially if they're engaging with you in a particularly negative or hostile way. I just wanted to throw that out there. Unfollowing people is totally okay. Don't feel guilty, just do it. The next big thing that you're able to do if you're getting harassed online or getting bullied in any way, is you have two options with Twitter. You can either mute somebody or you can block somebody. Muting, of course, as you can see on the screen, says you can keep following them, but now you don't see their updates. It's really nice if you need a break from somebody, or someone is, maybe what's a good example? I was going to try to avoid a non-personal example. Maybe someone is tweeting a little bit too much about the election these days, and you already voted. Maybe you care a little bit less. Maybe you mute them for the next month or so, right? That's a potential opportunity for you. And then, of course, if someone is really being aggressive towards you, you block them, and you can always block them. Again, I would not be afraid to block people. I'd be pretty willing to do that in any circumstance. Now, the big thing to note, though, is if someone blocks you or if you blocked somebody, it's very much the case that they're still going to be able to interact or see your timeline through friends of friends or through a separate account and things of that nature. So I just wanted to throw that as a quick disclaimer. Just because you block someone doesn't mean that they actually can't see your timeline or your screen, especially if you have a public Twitter profile, because then they can always access it through a different account or log out of Twitter and then just look at your timeline. So just an important thing to note. It's kind of like talking behind someone's back. It's better just to front stab people. That same principle applies here. We're just going to talk to people face to face. If we block them, then don't talk behind their back, because they might be able to still see that, unless you want to and you want them to see that. But just wanted to throw that out there. Now, the next big thing I want to focus on is the timeline, the main homepage of Twitter. And basically on Twitter, all updates from accounts you followed are going to appear in your timeline. It works much like the Facebook newsfeed for those of us who've had Facebook before. And the one thing I want to say here is that Twitter definitely runs many tests on its timeline often. This changes so much that it's hard to say like exactly what's happening with the newsfeed. Their product manager is famous for saying their algorithm changes on almost a daily to weekly basis. But roughly speaking, every time that you open up the Twitter app or you're on your phone or just log on to twitter.com, the algorithm is going to place on your newsfeed all the tweets from accounts that you follow and give them a relevance score. And the relevance score, we can think of it like a 0 to 10 score, a 10 being like, this is your mother, this is your son, this is your daughter, this is your brother, all that good stuff. And you have to show them that. And then a 0 being in relevance that it's not very important, right? So 10 being the most important, 0 being not very important. So Twitter is looking at your Twitter account, looking at the people you follow, and then assigning that relevance score. Some people are getting 8s, some people are getting 2s, and then the highest ones, the ones that Twitter believes are the most relevant to you, are what's going to appear on your newsfeed, on your timeline, excuse me. And there's a couple signals that we can key into. Like I said, there's so much that changes here, but roughly speaking, the big signals, number one, are recency, so that it's relatively recent. Twitter will go back to like 24 hours for people that you really are relevant to, like, again, someone that you have in your life 24/7. But it does like recency. Not saying it will always show the most recent tweet, but it likes recency. The next big thing is engagement. That means that there was engagement on the tweet, right? That other tweet that you were following this account, they post something and it's getting likes, it's getting retweets, it's getting comments, things of that nature. Well, then it's going to have a higher chance of popping up in your timeline and vice versa, right? And then, of course, the other big thing is rich media. So Twitter's always doing its best to optimize for the users that are on the platform. Some people tend to, and Twitter's looking at this when you're on Twitter, saying, oh, wow, you click a lot of videos, or wow, you click a lot of plain text, or you like those photos. Now Twitter's going to try and give you more of that, right? And so if someone's sharing a video and you Twitter has determined that you like videos, that's going to assign that post a higher relevance score and be likely to pop up in your timeline. So there's a lot to go there. There's a lot in there. We'll talk through some best practices, especially as we walk into Twitter. But those are some of the big things that affect popping up in somebody's timeline. Now, the other big thing that I'll just say, roughly speaking, is just those top tweets in your timeline. Those are based on accounts that you, generally speaking, interact with the most, the tweets you engage with, and roughly speaking, that, a couple other things, but yeah. The next big thing, I get a question about this all the time. What is a retweet for those of us that are just starting on this adventure? Well, quite simply, a retweet is just a reposting of a tweet on your timeline. It's kind of like allowing your followers to see the tweet if they have not already been previously exposed to it. This allows your followers to see any tweet that you choose to retweet, right? And if you've got a good follower base, let's imagine you've got like 500 followers and the person that you commented had like 2 followers and you retweet, well, now that tweet has the potential to reach your 500 followers. So retweeting can be a very powerful thing. One of the most beneficial things you'll see in a retweet is when an influencer or somebody bigger than you, someone with 20,000, someone with 100,000 or 1 million followers decides to retweet you. That's going to lead towards an incredible amount of engagement, right? It's a very powerful thing. But roughly speaking, in general, you should retweet whatever you think your followers will benefit from seeing, right? This is basically, and people say on their profile, retweets do not equal endorsements, but roughly speaking, for all intents and purposes, retweets absolutely mean endorsements. Legally, you might be required to say that, but when you retweet something, generally it's you saying, I couldn't have said it better myself, or, this is important and my followers need to see this. I got a good question from Goddard who just said, would retweet benefit us? Should we retweet with our comment? Yeah, so it definitely varies based on, the situation that you're in. However, retweeting in general is a good thing to do. You should have a healthy amounts of retweets in your timeline. However, in your profile, excuse me. However, you should not always just singly retweet people. You have to put your thoughts out there into the world as well. You can't just be a retweet machine, but retweets are one of the tools you have in your toolbox and definitely benefits you. And when the question is, should we retweet with a comment? It depends again. So a lot of times just the way the words are put can be great, but if you're retweeting with the comment, typically it's going to be retweeting something that you typically are in disagreement with, or something that you want to hype up just a little bit more and add some more context. Now, I will say from personal experience that retweeting with a comment typically does a little bit better than just solely retweeting something, especially because you're able to put your flair on it, so to speak, your words on it, frame the issue. And one of my favorite quotes from Morton Blackwell is, he who frames the issue first wins. And that's what that'll allow you to do, which is a positive thing. And then the other questions you had is, should we hashtag when we retweet? Well, it depends, again, based on the situation. However, I've got some rules on hashtags, and we'll get to those in just a couple minutes. So I'm going to hold the hashtag comment for just a second. If I don't answer your question, definitely ping it again, and I will get to it. And I got another question. When I want to reply to a tweet, when should I quote tweet, and when should I just normal reply? Yeah, that's a great question. So when you want to reply to a tweet, when you choose to quote tweet and reply, that allows your answer to be seen by your followers, right? Which means that you want it to be more public. When you just reply to a tweet, it's going to only exist inside of that tweet, right? And the responses to that tweet, which means it's going to be a little bit more of a closed ecosystem. Essentially, what you're doing when you quote tweet is that you're opening it up to a larger audience. And then when you are just replying to a tweet, inside that tweet, you are kind of just working within that ecosystem. So, one of the general rules of thumb are, so let's say that I'm interacting with somebody and it's a negative altercation, we're kind of confrontational, so to speak. Well, replying to the tweet means that, typically speaking, I'm going to be playing on their ground, so to speak. It's going to be access to, their followers they're going to see the tweet, then they're going to see your response. I'm not going to have a lot of backup there in a lot of circumstances. But if you choose to quote tweet it, well, then now you've kind of been able to say like, yeah, hey, look at my followers, hey followers, remember, look what I just commented in response to this person. And you might have a little bit more, of people on your, who have your back, so to speak. So it definitely depends, roughly speaking, but a good frame of reference is like, replying is a closed ecosystem. Quote tweeting will make it much more open and allow more people to participate inside of it, for better or for worse. Now, a couple more Twitter terms. The next big thing is a tweet thread. This looks a lot like an email chain. where if you run out of 280 characters, you can immediately tag a tweet underneath of it and underneath of it. And to tell the whole story, to keep it all in one place, which I certainly recommend, it's called a Twitter thread. Again, if this doesn't make a lot of sense from theory or from definition, we will walk through all of this inside the platform of Twitter itself too. So no worries there. The next big thing is tweet storm, people going on a tweet storm. This is typically similar to a thread in the sense that people are going to be posting a bunch of tweets at once. Typically, they're going to be numbered, like I have on the screen here, 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, etc. As you begin to tweet the full story, that's the process that's called a tweet storm. The next one is called trending. Trending is just what's happening in the trending tab. This is going to be one of the bigger places that we should watch out for, because there's going to be a lot of opportunities every single day to maximize that trending tab or utilize it for our best needs. And again, we'll walk through some strategy as we get into Twitter itself. The next big thing is an emoji or GIF. As you tweet people, as you're posting, you've got the ability to add emojis, and you also have the ability to add GIFs, which are animated image. GIF stands for graphic interchange format. There should be probably no other reason ever that you need to know that, but that's what it stands for. The owner of GIFs, there's a huge internet battle. I'm curious, but I'm sure most people are on my side here, but there's a big battle on the internet as to whether it's a GIF or it's a GIF, like GIF as in Jiffy or a GIF as in giraffe. And I believe it's GIF, really getting that G, not the J sound. And most of the internet agrees with me, but just a really fun side note, that's for sure. And then there's also another practice called live tweeting. So I brought us to that example before of, the presidential debate with Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Well, if you were tweeting alongside that presentation, you would be live tweeting the event. And that's what it is. They're just tweeting quickly and in real time about a specific event, things of that nature. I will say, live tweeting is one of the bigger opportunities that you have on Twitter. When things are happening and you instantly input your opinion, your 2 cents into the world, it can be incredibly valuable. Some of my most viral tweets in my history have come through live tweeting an event because we were there ready to go. And, of course, the event was happening live, but my preparation was already done. So I was just ready to send these tweets as they were and became the most relevant time to send, that's for sure. I got a couple questions still, and keep answering these as well. Why sometime we can't see the replies on tweets? That's going to be a lot of different scenarios why you wouldn't be able to see a reply. One of the bigger ones is that the author of the tweet has the ability to close the ecosystem, so to speak. So they can only allow people that have followed them to reply to a tweet. They can allow no one to reply to a tweet. And they can also hide responses to their tweet, which means that can remove the reply. Some other circumstances that could possibly arise are that your tweet is breaking Twitter's terms of service agreement, things of that nature, any type of doxing activity, which means that you're like putting out public information or sensitive information into the public. Things like that would immediately make the tweet disappear. But those are some examples of why you can't see replies on tweets. Happy to answer anything specific there too, or if a scenario has happened. And then Robert just asked, how long can a live tweet last? Well, once you tweet, that's a good question. Once you tweet, your tweet is out there. It's kind of like it's out there in the world until you can delete it, but typically it's just out there in the world. Even deleting tweets doesn't exactly get rid of them, as a lot of politicians would hope. But once you live tweet, I will say that your tweet has much less stopping power, in the sense that you're trying to get someone to stop someone from scrolling on Twitter. And that's what we call stopping power. You stop them from scrolling. Well, if the event is happening live, well, then your comment that you made 5 minutes ago may not be relevant at all, the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes along the way, which means that there's not a long shelf space. It really is going to depend on the particular event and what you're tweeting. But roughly speaking, I will say that live tweeting, or live tweets, so to speak, have kind of a shorter, much more viral capacity to them all. So they don't last very long in the sense that they'll just kind of be hidden by new information that's happening. But if you time it well, if you say the right thing, it has the potential to be the defining moment of the entire event or debate or situation, etc. And that's what's going to be seen by a lot of people. So, it's a tough question to say how long it's going to last, but generally speaking, it's going to kind of get like hidden by the more relevant news that's happening. But a lot of times, and not often, but there are a lot of examples of this, where one tweet went out And that was like the defining definition of how the world is going to take the event or process all the information that was being given to everybody. So it varies. It definitely varies, but generally on the it doesn't last too long. The next big thing is that there's going to be a lot of popular hashtags out there, and Twitter has them every single day. For example, one of the most famous ones is Throwback Thursday, which is happening here today. I love Throwback Thursday. That's one of mine. I put two on the screen as an example, like Follow Friday, Throwback Thursday. There's Monday Motivation. There's Wednesday Wisdom. There's so many of these. One of my bigger recommendations for people that are getting started on Twitter or that want to grow on Twitter is to find your hashtags, the ones that really work for you. Because like I said earlier, we really have to find our niche, so to speak. And one of the best things to identify a niche is a hashtag, right? And so pick one of them that fits your brand, that fits your messaging, that fits your direction online, and own it, dominate the space. And like I said earlier, I love Throwback Thursdays, and this is not Twitter, but on my Instagram stories, I throw my Throwback Thursdays up a lot, and I really enjoy doing that. A Monday, I'm a passionate person about Mondays. I'm one of the 2% of the world's population that loves Mondays, and I'm on a war against the 98% to make people love Mondays more. So I love Monday motivation, right? But this has to apply to you, right? What are the hashtags that are going to best fit your brand, and which ones can you create a series out of, right? One of the better pieces of things that we can do is pick one of these hashtags, pick our content, and then apply that consistency over time. And that's going to be a regular part of our brand identity. That is for sure. The next big thing is Twitter grammar. Okay, so I got a good question. How do I make a hashtag? We will get to hashtags in just 1 second. So I'm going to hold on that one as well, but we are almost there. And that's a good question, and I will definitely answer it. That is for sure. Okay, so first and foremost is Twitter grammar. So when I talked about tweeting at somebody, right, we can tweet at people. This is how we do it. We use the @ sign, which is the Shift 2 on a regular keyboard, and you put in their Twitter handle, right? I told you all that my handle was @robots, ROWEBOTZ. So if you wanted to @ me on Twitter, you create the @ symbol and then put my handle there. And so we have an example of that on the screen. I loved hearing Tim Phillips speak at Leadership Institute, but that's Tim Phillips AFP is his handle, and Leadership INST is Leadership Institute's handle on Twitter itself. The next thing that we have is we have DMs. We can direct message people. This is a one-on-one conversation. It's a private message. I will say, and this is important to note as well, that just because you were DMing back and forth, it's kind of like someone screenshots a group text. That can still happen on Twitter. You won't know that it's happened unless someone has, gone out with the news. So that's important to note. Just because it's a private conversation, don't immediately always assume that it's going to be private, especially if you're talking to journalists, especially if you're talking to people that, don't want to see you win in the end. Make sure that even though you're talking in a DM, that you're talking like it's going to appear in a deposition, because that's the way the world works. Sometimes people will take these conversations, try and make you look bad, screenshot it, and share it with the world. So just a good rule of thumb is, even though it's a one-on-one conversation, let's still assume that it's pretty public, and you'll be in a very good spot, that's for sure. And then the other thing to note is there's going to be, before we get to hashtags, because we got two great questions on hashtags, there's going to be URLs that you don't recognize, which happens on Twitter a lot because of the character limits. 280 characters is not a lot. Now, there's a lot of them called Bitly or Jump or G.OOGL, like Google, a little shortened. But now, and like I said on the screen here, they first saved space, but now they're kind of baked into a lot of services. And a lot of organizations, a lot of companies on the, excuse me, a lot of companies on the World Wide Web will have these custom URLs, because if you have a custom URL from a marketing perspective, you're able to, track how many people clicked on the link, and follow that person's, customer journey, so to speak, after they have done it. So there's a lot of these on Twitter. I would not be overly frightened by them on Twitter. Definitely want to be safe, double check everything, but just note that there will be a lot of shortened URLs there. Last but not least, let's get to hashtags about Twitter grammar, because we have one. Can we hashtag when we retweet? How do I make a hashtag? First and foremost, what is a hashtag? Well, a hashtag is just an agreed upon keyword, and sometimes it's used ironically or for comic effect, But that's all it is. It's a centralized conversation. Think of a hashtag a lot like a Facebook group, or think of a hashtag a lot like a coffee shop where people just got together and decided that was the meeting place. That, roughly speaking, is all it is on the World Wide Web. It's an agreed upon keyword. This agreement, this mutual agreement, happens pretty organically in most instances, where we all just started using one hashtag, and that just became the way that we started proceeding, right? It's pretty interesting to see how some of these hashtags are created. Oftentimes, especially for live events like the debates, the Oscars, TV shows, conferences, and events, they will specifically have a hashtag that they want people to use. And that's going to be the agreed upon keyword, right? They're going to try from an event perspective to pick the optimal hashtag that's going to make their event or their performance or conference make them look as good as possible. And in addition to that, there's a bunch of hashtags that exist out there for the purpose of specific communities inside Twitter chats. Like I said, the bigger thing we can do is find the hashtags that work best for us. And again, we'll explore hashtags inside the platform, but that's how we're going to start to find our audience and start to find the people that we want to follow us. And then there's a lot of hashtags on behalf of advocacy organizations. So, one of the ones I'd like to pick on a little bit, and not pick on, but mention a lot, is Melania Trump's Be Best campaign, hashtag Be Best. But that'd be an example of a hashtag that is kind of created on behalf of like an advocacy organization type of thing, and we're able to kind of push into the ethos from there. So all it is a mutually agreed upon word, and you can create your own words. You can create your own hashtag. My recommendations for you are these three things. Number one, your hashtag is short and sweet. It's simple and actionable. Number two, and number three, there's no double meanings, right? And so when we create a hashtag, I could create a hashtag right now, right? I can type in the chat, this is hashtag, LI digital. And that hashtag is now theoretically created, right? But the only way that hashtag becomes powerful is if we all start using it, right? And that means that sometimes it's more advantageous to just join existing hashtags where communities have already been established. But often it's going to be up to us to, if we decide to use a hashtag, to populate the hashtag, to dominate the hashtag, to use it and encourage other people to use it so it becomes a community, right? And these are the three rules that I have for that. Now, the biggest one is that last one I have. I think I have this, I may have it. Yeah, I do have it on the next slide, so I won't say it yet. But there's a lot of hashtags that have been out there. A lot of ones that have shaped politics in general, that is for sure. This is all from 2016. I'm waiting until 2020 is over before I refresh this slide with the 2020 hashtags. But looking back from 2016, there was no shortage of Feel the Burn hashtags, no shortage of WikiLeaks. I remember that coming out right about now, 4 years ago. Delete your account, which was Hillary Clinton's most famous tweet during the presidential election cycle, asking Trump, hashtag delete your account. Basket of deplorables. To this day, after Hillary Clinton made that statement, there are still people on Twitter that go by deplorable insert first name, right? And then there's also a lot of hashtags that you've seen associated with debates, town halls, and forums. They are everywhere. And like I said earlier, short and sweet, simple and actionable, and no double meanings. So some good examples of some short and sweet hashtags that I just created from the back of my head. Feel free to use them if you want to use them. But the real one that I wanted to shy people away from is that we have no double meanings. So this is a story from McDonald's, which is one of the largest companies in the entire world. Certainly exists, I think, on every continent, if not 6 of the 7 continents, which is pretty crazy. But again, this is a multi-million-dollar marketing budget. So just to say that this will happen, this happens in circumstances. So don't be blindsided by this. But they came up with the hashtag McD Stories, where they wanted people to share stories of them experiencing awesome things at their local McDonald's, right? But one of the things to note is that if the internet can pervert something or make it, worse than it appears, again, hashtag McD Stories, I'm not going to spell that out any more than I just did, then the internet will do that. And this multi-million-dollar marketing campaign went down the tubes because it was hijacked by people that were making fun of the hashtag rather than participating in the hashtag. So no double meanings is a word for the wise. And as we try and optimize any hashtag that we are currently using, we want to engage other people with our hashtag. Again, we're saying use our hashtag. This is the hashtag. Another good thing to do is just be aware of current events and seeing how your hashtag can insert into current events, or you can just utilize an existing hashtag to your benefit. And then typically speaking, a hashtag will incite action. If it's a great hashtag, that's what it's going to be. Ollie just put in the chat, hashtag Trump forever. That's a good example of inciting action. And that's exactly kind of the direction that I push people in with your hashtag, right? Coming back just a slide, we see feeling all right or hashtag political action, right? Because we're taking action. So a good thing for sure to do. We want to incite action with hashtags. So I got a couple questions on hashtags. Let me make sure we answer these really quickly. And hopefully I answered the previous ones. And if not, let me know. But Robert just said, are hashtags ever copyrighted? And the answer is no. They are never copyrighted. You are able to use somebody else's hashtag without fear of copyright infringement. However, there is a little bit to be fearful of in the sense that, let's imagine that this is like, feel the burn, right? We're in a Bernie Bros central Twitter ecosystem, right? Well, if you're in that ecosystem and you're not tweeting things that are along the same norms as them, well, that might cause some altercations, people yelling at you on Twitter, the need to mute and block people, etc. Or if you have a group of your friends, you can all get together and then like insert yourself into these hashtags, right? And start to create a ruckus and start to create a conversation or debate, things of that nature. So they're never copyrighted. However, people do kind of like own their space, so to speak. And that's really just because they've got size in numbers. So if you have equally large numbers or an effective amount of numbers, well, then you can start to use any hashtag that you want and really fill it with what you want. A good example of this from the past is there was a hashtag, there was something bad that was happening in the world. I forgot exactly what it was. I mean, a lot's happened this year, but something was happening. And so what happened instead, online, everyone was using one hashtag, and instead some different group, it's called BTS, it's like a boy band. I mean, but they are very powerful online. You cannot discount the power of boy bands on the World Wide Web and their fans. But they overtook the hashtag in this example and made it something entirely different, right? And so hashtags are never copyrighted. It really is just that agreed upon keyword. And hopefully you're able to like really own your hashtag, means that you're using it the most, or your friends, your followers, etc., are engaging with it often. The next question is, what do we benefit from creating your own hashtag? Yeah, so that's a good question. Typically speaking, there's not a ton of benefits from creating your own hashtag other than just being the first to centralize the topic, the narrative, story, things of that nature. There are some benefits to creating a hashtag in the sense that you choose the words, right? And again, that brings me back to my last quote. He or she who frames the issue first typically wins. And so if your hashtag is not appealing towards the other side, whatever side that may be, well, that could be an immense benefit because you were the one that was able to create the words, right? Create the hashtag. And that's really important in politics. I mean, we see this transpire every single day, right? There's a big difference when you see, hashtag anti-abortion trending on Twitter versus hashtag pro-life, right? Those are two very different words. They mean the same thing, but pro-life is what we are, and that's a bigger difference. That's an important thing to note. So we should absolutely do our best to make sure we're using hashtags that make us look as good as possible. That is for sure. The next question on hashtags is, can you put a photo in a hashtag? Yeah, you can tweet using a hashtag, right? So you can tweet a photo and then use the hashtag. And now when people look at that hashtag, they have the opportunity potentially to see that photo, right? But again, that'll make a lot more sense as we walk through Twitter itself. I think that'll start answering those questions. But yeah, roughly speaking, yes, but maybe not, depending on how you just worded that question, exactly how you foresee it. But you can always put a photo in a tweet. You can always put a video in a tweet. You can tweet whatever you want in 280 characters and then add the hashtag there. And that tweet is going to populate inside that hashtag. And hopefully that clarifies it up just a little bit. But we've got a couple of different Twitter accounts out there, and I just wanted to highlight the ones that were out there for all of us. So first and foremost is our personal account. So I've got Thomas Massey on the screen for all of us here today. And this is his account, and this is a personal account. This is what we're going to see with your mind. This is what yours is likely going to be. But it's important to note that there's a difference sometimes between these personal accounts and organizational accounts, right? There's a lot of organizations, kind of, for example, Leadership Institute has a Twitter account. Your organization probably has a Twitter account. And that's an important thing to note. There are tweets that come from an organization perspective. And there's also tweets that come from massive companies as well, right? One of the bigger notes you see is airlines doing this really, really well, where if you need to reschedule your flight or cancel or rebook or something's happened, you can DM them, the companies on Twitter, and they'll actually come back to you in customer service your situation, which is pretty awesome. I've actually tweeted at Delta before while waiting for my friend who's in line to change her flight. I just decided to hop on my phone on Twitter, ask them if they could change my flight. And before my friend got to the front counter to talk to the Delta representative in person, my flight had already been changed. I was good to go because I used the DMs of their Twitter, excuse me. So pretty cool stuff, and that certainly exists out there. And just wanted to show the different types of variety of accounts that you'll typically see on the platform. So what makes popular content on Twitter is a good question. Well, it's these things that I think really boil it all down. First and foremost is your timing, right? You got to hit people at the right time. Timing is everything. And next thing is the message, right? The message is really important, right? It's understandable and it's original is probably the best words that I can use immediately. But one of the bigger things I see a lot of conservatives make as a mistake, the typical mistake that I see that I really encourage you all to focus on is really your word choice. Again, like I was highlighting pro-life versus anti-abortion, this same principle applies to the words we type out in our tweet though. Our words should never be large words. We should use simple, short, direct words when we are trying to engage with people online. We should always write like we're writing to fifth graders, because that is the typical, I usually say like third grade, but right till we're writing towards fifth graders is going to be a better benefit for you as a whole. You know, you can't just type out, I'm flabbergasted, right? Because a lot of people are like, what does flabbergasted mean? This seems a little bizarre, right? Or if you just say, I'm mad, then people know exactly how you feel, right? So the message is important, that it's understandable and then it's original. This is a hot take coming from you. The next big thing, a call to action always incites higher levels of engagement for sure. One of the cool things you can do is there's a lot of ways that we can leave a reader with a call to action, either directly or indirectly, right? A direct call to action could be, you know, here's my video, let me know what you think in the comments down below. But indirect pleas for interaction, indirect calls for action can be fantastic, right? If I just tweeted out, I stand for Israel, right? And if you do too, you might want to like that. You might want to retweet that post, right? But there has to be some sort of call to action, if you get what I'm saying. It can happen either directly or indirectly. And then the other big thing are influencers. Influencers run Twitter. Hopefully all of us are trying to become influencers on Twitter. I certainly encourage you on that path. But one of the best things that we have are people that already have large groups of following. And so, you know, if you're just getting started, one of the most effective things you can do is get an influencer to retweet you, or you to engage with that influencer in the sense that it's a following that you want to build yourself. That's going to be a very beautiful thing and makes your content that much more popular. That is for sure. Okay, good question from Robert. In evaluating influencers, is it just a matter of how many followers they have? Yeah, I mean, every influencer strategy is different. That's for sure. However, I will say on Twitter, you're definitely, you know, the goal is certainly the big fish. You want people with as big a following as possible to be on your team, and that's a really good thing. However, you could have a bunch of small influencers be equally as effective depending on what you're trying to get accomplished, right? So it definitely depends, but as a rule of thumb, bigger is better. So yeah, when it comes to their followers, that is going to be one of the strongest indications that they're going to be able to help you or not help you, point blank. But it's not always the case, that is for sure. And when it comes to making things work and making things pop on Twitter, when it goes viral, is really understanding that there are two circles that we have to engage with when we're on Twitter. What you care about and what I care about, right? What you care about and what your audience cares about, right? And the best thing that we have to do is make sure that we are connecting those two things as close together, right? As these things come closer together, this increases the chance for our viral tweet. And if we are doing this, then we are in the sweet spot of the Venn diagram of what I care about, what you care about. If we both care about this, then we're going to take action on it. We're going to comment, we're going to retweet, we're going to interact in some way, right? That's really the nexus that we want to be at. So it's not just what you care about. And when you're tweeting, it should not just be tweeting about everything that you care about, and it can't be vice versa. You can't just be focused solely on them. It's the perfect blend of the two together. But what works best on Twitter from a theory perspective, this comes from BuzzSumo, which is a very popular website that I love and use often, that trends and that basically aggregates trending topics all across the World Wide Web. If you've used Twitter before, you know that Twitter is a trending tab that shows the US trends of the day. Well, BuzzSumo essentially is that for the entire World Wide Web. And this is what they found with what works best on Twitter. first and foremost, deep research, right? New insights. So anytime you can highlight something that people aren't aware of before, hypothetically, if you're the New York Post and you got emails that Hunter Biden sent to his Ukrainian counterpart to arrange a meeting with, the vice president of the United States at the time, well, that'd be new insights. That'd be some deep research, that's for sure. And people would definitely be talking about it, potentially today even, right? So that's a good hint at, what works best on Twitter. So that kind of that shock value, right? And you can add some shock value to your tweet. That's definitely going to help it out in general. I will say you have to play with this line carefully. It's definitely a gray area because you can overshock. You don't want to lie to people. I always say that you should intrigue, but you should not mislead people. That is for sure. The other thing that works really, really well off of all the tweets that they studied was opinion forming content, right? And that could be the current issue and having a clear viewpoint on that issue, right? For example, again, let's pick on Twitter today because we're talking about Twitter today. Twitter censors the House Judiciary Twitter account, and the clear viewpoint should be, if someone was tweeting and they want an interaction, might be that Twitter should be treated as a publisher and not as a platform. Section 230 might be a beneficial thing because they obviously are starting to make some editorial decisions about a lot of things on their platform. And if you make that viewpoint clear to people, people might want to engage or interact with that particular persuasion, that particular viewpoint, right? And so that is essential though. And you definitely want to be as clear as possible. One of the worst things you can do on Twitter as a platform is say, well, one side thinks this and the other side thinks that, and I'm somewhere in the middle, right? Unfortunately, that's not going to get you off the ground like you would hope it would. You definitely have to be biased on Twitter, right? Whatever you believe, just believe it, right? I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just telling you to stand firm with what you believe, especially when you're on a platform like Twitter. And generally, it's going to work a little bit better for you as a whole. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to do this slide really quickly, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break and work through examples of successful tweets and then hop into Twitter itself. So we're almost into Twitter, which is super exciting. But let me finish on this slide real quickly of why people share content on Twitter. First and foremost is it's an emotional response, right? You're like, yes, this solidifies my worldview, or this makes me angry, or this makes me happy. More people need to know this information, that emotional response, right? And so as we craft our tweets, we should always engage or optimize for emotion. If you are feeling something, don't be afraid to tell people how you're feeling in your tweet, right? That's what people connect. I mean, humans fundamentally connect most often on an emotional level. Any way we can use emotion in our tweets is going to increase the power of our tweet. The next big thing is that it's positive, right? It's positive for their side, right? I said earlier that we should be biased, right? But if you're highlighting something that furthers my point, right, then it's like a retweet easily, right? And then of course, useful or interesting information, everything from breaking news to, 7 reasons why millennials love avocado toast. That's going to be useful and or interesting, and people are going to be very likely to share that content. Okay, team, what we're going to do now is we're going to take our first, and time really flies, but we're going to take our first 5-minute break from 2:01 to 2:06 because I got started a little late, but we're going to take a 5-minute break right now. I'm not going to press next on the slides for 5 minutes. If you still have any questions, I'm going to hang out right here, but I'm not going to proceed with our material until 2:06. The break starts now. The recording, and welcome back. Let's continue on. All right, components of success. What does a good tweet look like? Well, first and foremost, it starts with, generally speaking, and this is general, but generally speaking, it's an emotion what we're adding, right? Plus a connection to an existing phenomenon, right? And then we're going to do our best to seed it with sharers, right? The most ideal circumstance for most of us is that we are going to get our tweet seen and spread by hopefully an influencer or group of people after we have sent it. So here's a good example of 1-sentence hooks with using emotion and then connecting to an existing phenomenon. All right, so first and foremost, we have Sean Hannity on the left. Come back. New York governor begs rich New Yorkers to return to the Big Apple, says, I'll cook you dinner, right? And then, of course, we see on Ben Shapiro's side, good COVID news you won't hear much about today, right? And these are both really good examples of using that 1-sentence hook. That is for sure. Now, these are 2 good examples, again, like I said, of what some good tweet structure looks like, but we can go that next level. And the way we do that is we add an action/direction. So we still have that emotion plus connection to existing phenomenon, We're going to seed that with sharers. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to add an action, right? Or direction, or give people a method for proceeding forward after they've learned the information through your tweet. Here's some examples of that. One from Congressman Dan Crenshaw of an indirect call to action, and Charlie Kirk with a more direct call to action, right? We'll go with Dan Crenshaw first. This is a huge deal. Again, really inciting emotion. The former administration laid the groundwork for years of divisive, unfounded accusations regarding Russian collusion. They knew it wasn't true, but they leveraged the power of government for a purely political purpose. And here's the indirect. Never give these people power again, right? And if you agree, you're like, yes, retweet, love it, yes. But now more directly, you see on the right-hand side, if you want a preview of Joe Biden's America, this is it. And then at the bottom, it says retweet, exclamation point, asking his followers to retweet the message, right? And so that's an example of a direct and indirect, but now we're starting to see some good formulas for success as we tweet on Twitter, right? And again, just because we ask someone to retweet things doesn't mean that they're going to. I will say the direct interaction plea typically is better for people that have an audience already. If you're just going out for the first time, it generally is indirect, like something, a statement like that. Always leaving with that zinger. Never give these people power again, right? People are going to have that same emotional connection to that story and are very likely going to engage with it by commenting, by retweeting, by liking, etc. The other big thing to note here that I want to say before we hop into Twitter is your profile needs to look the part. People should be able to ideally look at your profile and identify you, hopefully, as a professional in a lot of circumstances, in other circumstances as a journalist, in other circumstances as a humorist, and you've got a cartoon for a profile picture. No matter what, you need to be very purposeful about how you set up your profile. And doing so means paying keen attention to the seemingly small details. It's a group of things that are adding up to be a big thing, right? They always say the devil's in the details, and here the details really matter. That is for sure. And we see some examples of that. First and foremost, we have the headshot. I think especially for professionals, if you are a professional, that is necessary for sure. It could be an action shot. I think mine's an action shot right now, but it should be easily discernible who you are, right? We shouldn't have to guess between 3 different people which one is actually you, right? It should be a focused shot on you, either a headshot or an action shot. That's really relevant for sure. Also a good rule for dating profiles. If anybody's single out there, you don't want to do that. You want to have your first shot should be you, right? Okay, now not only this is a Twitter class, this is also a relationship class, so there you go. Okay, but next we have tagging organizations and projects. So a couple things here. You always want to cite kind of where you're from, right? Your organizations and projects, kind of your authority, so to speak. So with Katie Pavlich on the screen, we see that she's a town hall editor, Fox News contributor, FDD, NSFP columnist for The Hill, New York Times bestselling author, Gunsight grad, boot addict, born free, and of course, hashtag 2A. And just to add on to that for just a second, because I have this as my number 4 point, relevant hashtags, you can put hashtags in your profile, okay? And when people look for those hashtags, your account will pop up associated with that particular hashtag. If you're popular enough to, a lot of relevance things coming into play, but you have the chance of that. So if you really do know your niche and you know exactly where you want to, who the people you want to target on Twitter, I absolutely encourage you to use a relevant hashtag inside your profile. Now, most of us probably don't know that yet or are a little bit more diverse, so we might not necessarily have hashtags. It's going to be your preference, but if you really are laser focused on one thing, don't be afraid to put in a hashtag on your profile. The other big thing too that I think is really relevant that will elevate your profile, it's definitely necessary if you ever want to get verified on Twitter, but in general it's a positive thing, is having some form of contact email form, right? So my biggest recommendation is having Google Insurance in the first place, which is a personal website, right? You see katiepavlich.com, you see lawrencejones.com in the examples. My website's digitalrow.com. It's very easy to create a personal website these days using like Wix, Squarespace, Weebly, things like that. But these are the small details that are going to give your profile a much needed sense of credibility. And it's these things combined when someone scans your profile, maybe someone who's an influencer, can immediately see that this is going to be an okay person to retweet, or that this person stands for X, Y, and Z. But removing ambiguity is going to be a very positive thing when it comes to your profile. People should be able to scan and understand where you're coming from, and you have to look the part. So whatever you're looking for, if you're, like I said, the journalist or the celebrity, look the part. That's for sure. You know, they say dressed well, test well, and that is absolutely the case here on Twitter. The other big thing to note, as we share things on Twitter, it's an important thing to note that we live in a world where mistrust of the media is at an all-time high. And so we are always going to be, no matter how accurate the story is, I mean, even potentially, you know, some incriminating evidence like emails, we're going to be fake news to the other side. And so that's an important thing to know. And so when we're sharing stories on Twitter and on the World Wide Web in general, but definitely on Twitter, really just encourage you to verify your sources and tips. Look through that stuff just really quickly. What's your evidence for the statement that you're making is a good question. And then issue corrections and apologies as needed, right? The takeaway here is to verify your sources, right? I always recommend, if we're sharing an article, that we actually just click on the article first. Just, you don't have to read the whole thing, but just scan it, right? So we know exactly what we're associating ourselves with, that is for sure. But definitely just take that, you know, into consideration, verify things independently, don't take things at face value, especially on Twitter. And in the case that you do need to issue a correction or a public apology, don't panic, right? It happens all the time. And my recommendation is just to simply be humble, straightforward, and move on. And actually, one of the benefits of Twitter being a happening now element, a happening now platform, is that people often don't have the time to look back at your tweets or obsess about corrections, things of that nature. But don't be afraid to own it and just move forward, because it definitely happens. Sometimes you share a story and it doesn't end up to be the case, you know, things like that. It's totally okay. Now, the other big thing is that our goal is to have our messages read and spread, okay? And so we want to make people look good by association and always give people something to react to. You know, you should always think of yourself kind of almost fishing when you're tweeting, because you're kind of launching things out there, and you know, sometimes people are going to bite. It's going to be a really good thing, but we're always going to bait the hook, you know, with relevant things, you know, that people will want to engage with. That is for sure. But you know, we've talked about it a lot, but there's no better place to exist except for actually in Twitter itself. So what we're going to do next is we are going to open up my Twitter account and walk through it as a platform. Again, as we're walking through the platform, any questions at all, happy to press pause or explain anything, that is for sure. But one quick disclaimer before I hop up my Twitter account. Again, this is a live Twitter feed of other people's opinions. I can't control what people have decided to tweet during this class. And if someone says something inappropriate, I just want to apologize in advance. This probably won't happen, but I just add this disclaimer to cover my own, you know, yeah, okay, cool. So let's go ahead and open up my Twitter account and let's get started. Let's get started. And I'm going to start from the very beginning. And let me come back up to the top, and here we are. Okay, this Elon Musk already at the top. There we go. Okay, but we are here. We are in Twitter. So let me go ahead and walk through some of the main home screen that's happening here. So first and foremost, for those of us that have logged on, of course, we recognize basically our three quadrants here. We have our first one on the left column. Right in the middle is going to be our timeline. And right on the right of everything is going to be what's happening, and also our search feature right here, which is going to be pretty great. So a lot of cool things there, that is for sure. So first and foremost, the basic question that I get is, how do I tweet, right? Of course, they make it pretty easy for us. So we have the ability to tweet by pressing this button right here, or just to start typing immediately in our timeline. Now, there is a difference between the two, and it's this. When I press tweet on the side, my tweet kind of pops up and fills kind of this private box, kind of puts everything else behind it. That's my preference. That's my way of, and I typically tweet if I'm tweeting live. Again, if I just tweet up here, then I can start typing my tweet. But again, it's not going to hide what's happening below. And oftentimes, especially if I'm trying to get something out of my head, I can get distracted by something that's happening below, and then all of a sudden forget what I was about to tweet, which is why I really like tweeting from here. That way it kind of like just covers the rest of it up just a little bit more, and I can begin to tweet. Once we've begun to tweet, and we're going to do that right now, we've got a couple options. So I'm going to go ahead and just frame a tweet real quickly. Let me just send this out. We're going to type out a quote, one of my favorite quotes: "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." And it's from a great conservative philosopher, Edmund Burke. Great man. Okay, so we just typed out our tweet. I just want to highlight a couple things that have happened as I typed out this tweet. So of course, I just typed out what I wanted to appear. In this example, I've chosen not to use any hashtags. Now, if I wanted to add a hashtag or create a hashtag, this is my opportunity, right? I can go hashtag, stop evil. And that could be a hashtag that other people have used, or now when I send this tweet, it's going to appear and people start searching the hashtag stop evil, right? So we could add a hashtag, create a hashtag, and as I use the hashtag symbol and I start typing, like I just typed in C, then we're going to see Twitter try and auto-populate the popular hashtags that may fit in along the way, right? And so C, we see censorship or confirm ACB. If I typed in M, we see Morning Joe and Mike Pence pickup lines. I didn't know there were Mike Pence pickup lines. I kind of want to save this hashtag for later. I'm kind of curious to see what these are. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, we're all going to ignore that. I'm going to look at that on my own time and not our time. Okay, so that's when we're able to look at, add hashtags. And like I said, it's going to start making suggestions as we type in letters. Okay, cool. Now, the next big thing that we have here is our first setting, which is allowing replies with our tweet, which mine is set as everyone can reply. That's going to be the default for your tweets if your Twitter account is set to public. Totally great. It's my recommendation. Everyone should be able to reply in most circumstances. However, there are some other options out here for us. So we can choose that only people that follow us can reply to our tweet, or only people that we mention can reply to our tweet. Really just kind of closing that ecosystem off just a little bit. And then of course we have our options down here where we have the options to, first and foremost, we can add rich media. So this is how we would add either a photo or a video. Clicking on this will just open up my file explorer. From my file explorer, I can just kind of maybe hop into my pictures real quick. And, if I wanted to add this American flag, and I can add my American flag to my post, I could make that a video as well. Also, as we add photos and add things to Twitter itself, as you can tell, there's an option to edit. So in this top right-hand corner, we have the American flag. In this circumstance, the American flag isn't really filling out like I exactly want it to. And so maybe I can, just reformat it just a little bit, make this a little bit better for me. And now you can see the American flag fits just a little bit more ideally as a whole, which is pretty nice. Now that we've been able to edit it, and of course we had a couple options. So I picked the Twitter card option. Then there's also a square and a 3x4. So a couple of different options there, and I can use this magnifying glass to zoom in and zoom out. Can also add some descriptions and some alternative text, just in case the image doesn't appear. Definitely not necessary on Twitter, I would say, but really cool feature that has now been enabled by Twitter. Now, there's a couple other things we can do with this photo that just popped up, and this happens anytime we upload a video or a photo. So we have that edit option, right, that popped up in our top right-hand corner right here. But we also have now the option to tag people and add a description. And one of the cool things that we can do is actually tag people. And so, for example, let me just tag Leadership Institute in this post. One of the cool things that I've done, now that I've tagged this person in this post, is that, let me just get rid of my annotations really quickly, is that you can see down below that Leadership Institute is tagged, all right? So now they're going to be able to follow this entire conversation. They're going to be able to see what's happening as I send this tweet into the universe of the world. Pretty cool stuff. Now, if you are going to take pictures of people or taking pictures with people, I really recommend you actually tag them. So tagging is a good feature. And also, one of the things we could do, for example, if you're trying to tweet at Leadership Institute up here, I go at symbol, if you remember that correctly. Leadership Institute's handle is right here. And now they're going to be able to see this tweet. And it kind of fills up space above all of, in the main area, which means it's removing from my 280 character count. But if I choose to tag somebody instead of just adding them, well, then it's not going to count against me in my character space. So that's kind of nice and a good advantageous benefit. The next thing we're able to do is add a description if necessary. Again, I would not be too laser focused on a description. It can be relevant in some instances. Bailey actually just brought up a good point. She says, I believe alt text is for visually impaired users, and that's definitely the case. The description is also in that circumstance a very popular feature for people with ALS and things of that nature, ADS, excuse me, and things of that nature. Okay, cool. So that's the cool thing that we can do. I'm gonna actually delete this photo. I just wanted to show you what the options are when you open it. The next big one after adding our own photo or video from our computer is that we can use GIFs. And like I said earlier, GIFs are very powerful. And responding to tweets using GIFs can go really well for you. So please feel free to start exploring, start using these GIFs to your advantage, right? So maybe I'll just type in #freedom. We'll see what kind of pops up here. I said the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Maybe it's like Mulan. Let's get down to business. Here we go. And now we can add that GIF right there. So we can add any of the GIFs that are connected. As a fun fact, they're all sourced from the website Giphy.com. And we can actually upload and create our own GIFs. And if Giphy chooses to accept you as a partner, and if you want to go down this route, which I certainly recommend for a lot of people, well then, once that GIF has been approved, well now then I can use that GIF on Twitter, and so can anybody else, right? And so some cool GIFs to make are maybe your organizational logo, changing back and forth, or something small. If it's a campaign, could be really helpful as a whole. But GIFs are a tremendous opportunity. Don't sleep on GIFs. All right. The next thing that pops up after GIF is polls. So we're able to ask people polls, and this is a great thing to do for engagement. This is an awesome route, an awesome thing to boost the amount of engagement on any particular tweet. Or if you're just not getting much of engagement in general, just post a poll to people. People love answering questions, and myself included. But now, in this example, I could say agree, disagree. And you actually have up to 4 options. Every option has 25 characters that you could post in them. And then you can actually choose how long the poll will go for. 1 day, all the way hours, minutes, all that good stuff. So that's the polling option that we're able to add to our tweet. Again, if you're looking for engagement, or if you just want to see if your followers are going to respond to your stuff, don't be afraid to throw out a poll towards them. That's a good thing to do. Next big thing that we have, similar to our GIFs, is that we have our emojis. And for example, under Edmund Burke, my favorite emoji that I use all the time is the American flag. Edmund Burke was not an American, so actually I'm going to delete it in this circumstance. But I love the American flag. I love that emoji. But there's also your emojis, right? So don't be afraid to use emojis in your tweets. Very positive thing to do as a whole. And then the last option we have in our tweet itself is that we are able to schedule this tweet. So maybe we don't want it to go now, or it's going to be better timed in the future. Or one of my bigger recommendations for people is to have a proactive mindset instead of a reactive mindset. In that example, I'm saying that, maybe that we create some tweets today that are going to go out first thing in the morning tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning the next day after that, right? So we can go ahead of the curve, and we don't have to wait before we schedule our tweets out. We can put this ahead of time. Now, the last thing that's here, let me just copy this because I'm not sure if it goes away if I click this. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Yeah, oh, it does. Okay, there we go. So let me discard this because I already copied it. But if you choose not to send the tweet like I just did, you have the option to save your tweet like I just chose not to do. And if you do, then there's going to be a whole draft, Twitter drafts of your previous tweets that you are able to use. For example, thanks Dunkin' Donuts, and then we can say done. Okay, oh, I was editing it, excuse me. I just clicked on it, there we go. Thanks Dunkin' Donuts, and now the tweet is ready to go. So one thing that I do recommend though for you all is to not sleep on your drafts. So if you have some good direction, or maybe you just want some ideas for later, feel free to populate your drafts with some options, and then you can use those for, as a launching pad for better ideas, or it can be a vault of, ideas that are ready to go at a whim's notice. For example, and I know this is a Dunkin' Donuts tweet, but maybe this was my unsaved draft, and I could say this is my evergreen content. I can just look at my drafts, look for the evergreen content that works best for me right at that time, and press send. Awesome. Okay, so those are all the options that we have inside the tweet. Actually, there's two more things. Let me just talk those real quickly. First and foremost is this the spinning globe. This is going to fill based on our character count. So as I type more things, the character count tends to fill. Like I said, your limit is 280 characters. And once you get close to it, it starts to count down. I've got 2 characters left, 1, 0, and now the tweet wouldn't actually send until I make any adjustments. So pretending that I do have lots to talk about and lots of words to tweet in this tweet. What we're going to do is what I said earlier. We're going to create a thread, a Twitter thread, and that's going to be this plus option. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit this plus option. And if I do, now this tweet is going to appear directly below the first tweet, and I have an additional 280 characters, which is awesome. So I can tweet this out, I can press plus again, and hypothetically, if I still have more words to type, then I can continue to type right here. Now, the big thing here is, and let me just kind of get rid of these. Hold on a second. The big thing to note here with these Twitter threads, like I said earlier, is this is how we keep everything in the same place. And so if there's a lot that's happening, or if you're covering a live event and you're just reacting to what's happening, don't be afraid to use your threads, like I just did there, to consolidate all the information in one place. Okay, so I got a good question. How can you chain tweet or series tweet, or do we do them all at the same time? Oh, I think I just answered that question, actually. Sorry, I just looked at the chat. Yeah, so instead of this tweet option, I just hit this plus, and now I'm able to use what we call a Twitter thread, which is effectively chain tweeting, yes. But yeah, so all it is the plus symbol, and once you tweet all, everything's gonna send at the same time. Yes, everything's gonna send at the same time. Hopefully that answers your question. And the last thing that we have to do, once we've created our tweet and we are ready to go, again, in my circumstance, I chose no hashtags, which is totally fine. But the last thing that we're going to do, is press backspace and then press tweet. All right, now the tweet has gone out into the world, and let me just exit out of this real quickly. As you can see, it pops up top of my timeline, but not for long. And this is Twitter. I mean, there's a million tweets per second. That is for sure. Hopefully some people will engage with the tweet, but we will definitely see towards the end. Okay, so that's exactly how we send a tweet, walking through that process, the very basics of Twitter. Let's start getting to some of the more exciting and adventurous stuff that exists in this platform. So the next place I want to go actually is our profile. Okay, so we're on our profile. I just clicked on myself. You can always click on your profile also using the left-hand side column and just clicking over to profile. But I just clicked on myself and that brought us right to our profile. But let me go ahead and clear my drawings real quickly. So in your profile, the two major pieces of real estate that you have on Twitter for your brand, for your logo, for all of that stuff is going to be your Twitter profile picture and your Twitter banner, right? We want to make sure that we utilize these in the best way possible for us. And as you can see, mine is just me speaking in front of people, but that's what I'm doing right now, which is why that's the case. And then you see my action shot, my point. I think my comment for that was like, hey, that's a great point. I agree. And there we go. But yeah, really important that we think about this. And one of the bigger questions I have for a lot of people, maybe you have a Twitter account that's live right now, and maybe it's been live for a little bit, maybe you're managing your organization's Twitter account, etc. My question for you is, when is the last time that you changed your Twitter background? When's the last time you've changed your Twitter profile picture? And if the answer is that you haven't, then my good recommendation for you is absolutely to try something new. This is one of the bigger places that we have to really customize our Twitter profile. Let's make sure that we're maximizing these opportunities. What worked in 2014 may not work well in 2020 today, right? You know, when I first created that Twitter account, you know, everyone cared about those apple bottom jeans and those boots with the fur, but now, you know, they care about, you know, insert new popular trending song. And right, like, you get what I'm saying though. The fresh coat of paint is a really good thing to do, especially on behalf of an organization over time. That is for sure. And it may not be your profile picture, it may just be the Twitter background, but if you have not changed these at all, ever, besides the first time that you created it, definitely consider changing it and updating it and optimizing it for success. Okay, I got a good question. Let me just read this out loud real quickly. Do you know anything about the algorithm on subsequent tweets in a tweet thread? I've noticed my first tweet will get good engagement, but subsequent tweets in the thread, even after posted shortly thereafter, have significantly less reach and engagement. Yeah, that's a good question. And there's a couple of things there. First and foremost, the main tweet that you send is going to be what is the thing that stops people from scrolling, right? So the number one thing that we have to deal with is attrition, which means that people are going to fall off as they try to engage with more and more of our tweets. So just by design, Twitter's algorithmic design, the first tweet will always have the most engagement. The second one will have the second most, and then it's going to drip off from there, right? So that's always going to happen. That's always going to be the case. So we definitely have to deal with that. But yeah, so the big thing to note there is it's kind of like a story, right? Where most people will want to skim the story. They want to know the who, the what, the where, the when, the where, the why, those W questions, the H questions too. Once they have that information, the rest of the Twitter thread can be pretty irrelevant to their needs, which means that they're going to kind of push on into the rest of the universe of Twitter. That is for sure. So that's a good thing to note about the algorithm. Some things to counteract that, some strategy we can do to maximize our opportunities here is, first and foremost, is question the need for the thread in the first place. If you're already creating a Twitter thread, which I do encourage you to do if you have that information, you should immediately start asking yourself, is all this information necessary, right? In the sense that if it's possible at all in one tweet to summarize everything that's happening, and then instead of creating a bunch of additional tweets, we actually just tweet out, an article or a place for someone to click onto, get onto a landing page where they can learn the full breadth of the information. That's going to be a better strategy overall, right? So that's a big thing to note. Generally speaking, let's just make every single word earn its way onto the tweet, roughly speaking. And if it is going to be a bigger message, then what we want to do typically as a best practice is push them to a web page, to our email, etc., to where we can then give them the rest of the information, all the good stuff. That is for sure. But yeah, so from a strategy perspective, first and foremost, as you Twitter thread, I would always expect it to be less and less engagement the further and further down you go. To counteract that, we're always going to make sure that we make every word earn its way onto the tweet. And if possible, we're going to direct them to an external source where they can engage all the information in one breath. That is for sure. But yeah, everything you're noticing is pretty on par. And that was a good question that you brought up. That is for sure. Hopefully that answers it. And let me know if I can clarify anything or if I can speak more to it. I just got another question. Is there a way to check effectiveness of one versus another in terms of levels of engagement? Yes, absolutely. There's a robust level of analytics. And let me get through the rest of my profile, and then we're actually going to walk through tweet analytics in a second. Our tweet went out 2 minutes ago. We'll check the analytics on it when it gets to 5 minutes. But yes, before we get there, let's just work through the rest of the profile. So the next big thing, like I said earlier in the presentation, is our description. Okay, so this should obviously be able to tell everyone what you do, what's going on, right? So director of digital training, I teach conservatives how to win online. Clear winning, what's happening there? Really good stuff. Raised in Montana, like I said, I always tell people that, which is really cool. Okay, so next thing that we have is we have our location. We have a location. If you want to get verified on Twitter, you have to have all this information. Your account has to be public. You have to pick information. You have to have a link. And you also have to put your birthday, which is a little unfortunate because I like hiding my birthday from the world, but people can see it, so it's whatever. But yes, and you can see when I joined. I joined in October 2011, and you can see my follower to following ratio, all of that good stuff. Okay, cool. So it is the small details though. Like I said, the small detail of just having a personal website adds an incredible amount of legitimacy to my Twitter account as a whole. One of the best things you can do if you are trying to increase your credibility is to have a personal website, and using that personal website, we can now tell the rest of the story, so to speak, our full bio, our portfolio, our contact page, etc. For example, I'll click on mine just real quickly, and I'm only doing this as a quick example because I have got a thing that I think I really require people to have on their websites these days if they want to do this and be a personality, so to speak, is you have to have a press tab. So I have a press tab on my website. Press tab comes up. You see my TV highlight reel from Fox News. You see my speaker bio and headshot and a contact form. Now, this has worked out a ton. One American News Network, most recently this year, was reaching out to me through my contact form on my website because they found my profile on Twitter, right? So they found my profile on Twitter, then they clicked on my website, they saw that I do press and I do media, and I got the opportunity, right? Like I said, these are the small tweaks on your Twitter profile that are going to make a tremendous difference in the long run. So again, just one last time to emphasize it, a personal website does do a lot for your Twitter account. That is for sure. Okay, I got a couple questions before I move on to the rest of my profile. The first one is, how were you able to gain all the followers you have now? How did you start? What did you tweet? What's your own story with Twitter? That's a good question. And yeah, that's a really good question. So yeah, roughly, again, I don't want to make this training about me necessarily, but I'll just emphasize it in 2 minutes or less. So what happened is my bulk of my following came when I was the editor-in-chief of an online publication. And I would write articles every single day, probably five to 8 articles every single day. They were 200 words roughly, so they weren't very long, but that's still a lot of articles. They're talking about a lot of stuff, right? And so as I was doing that, and by the end of the run, my team and I achieved over 12.8 million page views, and every month we were, hitting about 1 to 2 million page views per month on our website. And during that course, on the bottom of every article that I wrote, I had follow the author on Twitter @robots, right? And I had some very viral articles that went out there in the world, and people wanted to comment about the author of the story, which was me. They would follow me, they would include me as they shared the post on Twitter and beyond. And my following grew exponentially through that process. So the real thing is, every day for a year, I posted at least 8 pieces of content on the World Wide Web. And some of those went viral. And of those viral hits came my following. That's where the bulk of it came from. Now, of course, obviously I follow back everyone in my trainings, which is a popular way to grow. I speak at conferences across the country in front of hundreds of people. I spoke at CPAC 2020. I spoke at CPAC 2019. Things like that will increase your following pretty quickly. And that's kind of the gist of how I got to where I am. Now, I typically follow more people than most people do, from my perspective, but like happened in this training, I love following my students, love giving people that follow back, and that's just what I do personally, which is why my following is a little high, and my followers are just slightly higher than that. But that's kind of the rough teach in 2 minutes. Okay, so really it was not necessarily what I was tweeting at the time, it's what I was doing, but I was citing my Twitter, and that's what led to my growth. And obviously it's a lot of things that's happening in the external world. I appear on Fox News, One American News Network, that also leads to Twitter followers, right? That a lot of that stuff is how it kind of happened. So it actually wasn't necessarily my perfect tweets. It was my life outside of Twitter that kind of lent itself to my following. Okay, Sarah just asked, why do you need to enter a birthday? That's so they know how old you are, roughly speaking. Again, I wish I knew the full answer to that, and I wish I didn't have to display my birthday. I'd be the first one to take it down, but unfortunately it is necessary. And Twitter requires it. You need it if you want to get verified ever in the future. Elena just asked, what is your take on how many and what kind of people to follow? Yeah, so it depends on your profile for sure. As an activist, I would never be afraid to follow more people than are following me. I'm not really that big into vanity metrics in the first place. I'm about making this platform work for me, right? And that's the number1 solution that I have in that sense, is that as long as the platform is working for you, the follower to following ratio is pretty much just a vanity metric, right? It doesn't mean that much in the world of things. Of course, your followers do more than anything else, but your effectiveness on the platform is ultimately what matters most. And so if you are coming from a celebrity perspective, though, obviously you want to have more followers than you are following, which is a good thing to have. If you're a journalist or you're coming from the activist perspective, like I said, I would not be afraid to follow more people than are following me. I think most people tend to average out around 1,000 followers and 1,000 following. I'd say that's probably the typical person part of these trainings. So yeah, those are my general thoughts. I would say we should always focus on, and this is where my #1 priority would be if I'm trying to grow on Twitter and try to grow my following, is the amount of engagement that I'm getting on the platform. So if I want more people to follow me, I want more followers as a whole, then I should be chasing engagement, not necessarily the number itself. That's going to happen because of the engagement, but the engagement is going to be the #1 leading indicator towards more followers for sure. And we'll walk through some strategies for gaining following as we walk through Twitter as a platform itself. So if I don't answer your question or I didn't answer your question, let me know. Hopefully I hit it on the right hand. Okay, you said thank you. Okay, cool. Okay. And then the last question that I got is, how do you create your own website? Yeah, so the ones that I recommend are super easy. So the one I recommend the most is, and this is what mine is made on, is squarespace.com. Mostly because you can create your website for free to see if it actually works for you, if you can do it. And then you can pay for it if it's working, right? Which is a really good thing. You can just get started today for free, which is really nice. Not being paid by Squarespace to advertise them, by the way. So I just kind of sound like this. I just really enjoy them. But the other ones that I like are Wix.com. And these are all drag and drop templates. So no coding is required. I mean, that's why we just can kind of just get started. And the last one that I'll recommend is Weebly.com. I recommend these 3 because they are the most drag and drop non-technical website builders out there. Now, we can certainly get into some really great ways to build websites, but typically speaking, if we're just going to create a website for our Twitter or just like an online portfolio type of thing, Wix, Weebly, or Squarespace are going to be your best bet. That's for sure. Awesome. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and continue on. And the way we're going to continue on is our tweets, right below our profile picture. So this came out 13 minutes ago. Let's go ahead and check in on this tweet. So first and foremost, I'm just going to go ahead and click it to open it up a little bit, really just highlight it. And now we see that we have options for analytics. We can see how this went. Well, first and foremost, we can see quote tweet and 3 likes, which is great. But now we can actually click view tweet activity. It's right here. It just says view tweet activity. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one more time. And now we can see exactly how this tweet has performed over the course of 14 minutes, right? In the last 14 minutes, it's reached 200 people. 9 people have engaged with it. 3 people liked it. 3 people clicked onto my profile because of it. 2 people expanded the tweet. And then 1 person retweeted me using a quote tweet, which is pretty cool. But now, immediately with this information, we were able, God just said he was the first one to like it. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And actually, a fun fact, I only tweet that statement when I'm teaching my Twitter classes. So if you see that in the future and you're not here, you're like, oh, Steven must be teaching Twitter. But that's honestly the case. But okay. What I was going to say is, yeah, these are the engagements that we are able to discern immediately. There's a more robust place for analytics, and we're going to get there throughout this presentation. But the thing to look for in your tweet analytics, like I said, the number one thing that you want are your likes, your retweets. Likes and retweets. Those are the 2 that really indicate success. So we got 5 likes, we've got 2 retweets, and that's indicating to me that this tweet was doing okay, right? And at least not bad, that's for sure. And you can see it constantly update. I said 202 impressions, now we're at 211 impressions. So this is constantly live updating. I can leave this up, check it an hour later, it's going to be a different result. Pretty cool stuff to see for sure. But that's the basics of your analytics. And my recommendation is to gauge your analytics, right? And again, we'll walk through a more robust place we can do that, but we should have a pretty good finger on the pulse of what our typical engagement looks like, right? And this is actually a little low for me, honestly. It's a little sad, but it's okay. But we see 2 quote tweets now, and we can click on those quote tweets, and there we go. Thank you for the quote tweet. I appreciate that. I just liked it. And then we can also click the likes. We can see who exactly was the person that liked it. There we go. Like, follow. There we go. Awesome. And then the other place that you'll notice, as people engage with your tweets, and this is going to take us to our next place, which is our notifications, right? Where we can see exactly what's happening after we have decided to tweet or things that we are caught up in. Again, this is my live Twitter. I don't know what's in my notifications right now. Hopefully nothing bad. Okay, looks like we're okay so far. All right. Okay, so we see immediately people reacting to my tweet. I was tagged in another tweet pretty recently that has gone and totally viral. It was this one. Okay. Here it is. Okay, so I was tagged on this one. Again, they did the same principle that I taught you just to do a second ago. So let's keep this in mind. They shared a photo, right? And when we shared that photo, we were able to tag people. And in this example, I was tagged, right? And so now I'm going to receive all the notifications for this. And so will the other people, right? We see CJ Pearson, Ryan Fernier, Dean Borelli, some cool people, that's for sure. But I was tagged in it, so now it's going to appear in my feed. And then when you choose to tag people, that's going to happen for them. Now, the other big thing that we have is at the top for notifications, we're going to have mentions, and then we're going to have verified. Excuse me, you only have all in mentions. If you have a verified account, then you'll have verified. It's not really that great. All you do is you just see your mentions from specifically verified accounts, which can be helpful. I've not found it helpful in a lot of circumstances. I didn't know Alvita King followed me, but that's pretty cool. Feeling pretty good about that. But anyways, that is your notification central, okay? So as people are interacting with you, as people are engaging with your tweets, that's always gonna appear in your notifications. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So let's continue on this wonderful tour of Twitter as a platform. Awesome, and we're gonna click back up. So we were at home, we went to notifications. The next place we're gonna go is actually the Explore tab. Awesome, so welcome to the Explore tab. Some couple options here that's happening right now. So first and foremost, Twitter kind of breaks things up a little differently, and this has changed over time quite extensively. But first and foremost, there's the For You. Okay, so this is where it's going to default. If you click over to Explore, this is going to be the first page that populates is the For You page. Now, what this is Twitter doing its best guess at finding the most popular things on Twitter at the time for you, right? It's for you. So only you see this page, right? So the big thing to note here is I see a lot of people on this For You page thinking that this is the trending page. This is not. This is only for you. So that's important to note. If we wanted to click over to the trending tab, we're able to do that right here. Of course, we see US elections first, but let's go ahead and click on trending. Now that we clicked on trending, now these are the top United States trends on Twitter right now, right? And it goes all the way 1 and goes all the way down. I think it appears the top 30 trends is what it is, which is pretty cool. We can start to see exactly what's happening. You know, the #1 thing trending on Twitter today is crooked Joe Biden, which is kind of funny. By Tiffany is #2. Nikki, who announced a surprise collab with another person who I don't know their name. You know, there's people named Little Baby. This person's named Sada Baby. I mean, the names for rappers these days, I think it's a little I don't know. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot happening with these trends. Sorry, I just looked at the trends. Sometimes they like, just distract my eye. But now here's what we have as an opportunity. So let me walk through exactly what we could do from a strategy perspective here. Okay, so we see the #1 trend. We see the #1 trend is crooked Joe Biden right now. Okay, so now we're going to use that to our advantage. So if we use crooked Joe Biden, I'm not actually going to tweet this out because I'm a 501c3 teaching right now. But now if we tweet it out, you know, our thoughts about this, you know, my thoughts on Hunter Biden, and then use the hashtag crooked Joe Biden. Well, now that hashtag is the #1 thing being used today on Twitter. So that's really good to think about, right? Which hashtags can we insert our brand, our message in and leverage to our ability? But this is not where we stop using the trending tab. The trending tab is very important for political purposes, okay? So let's go a little bit further in. So I'm gonna discard this real quickly, and let's go in. And I did not plan this. Normally it's like a negative Republican thing. So this is actually kind of a fun class today. Well, here we go. Let's click on crooked Joe Biden. All right, so as you can see at the top, Twitter is under fire for censorship of a New York Post article exposing the corruption of the Bidens. Very ironic, we're on a Twitter class here today, looking at Twitter censorship for sure. But we see what's happening here, okay? So first and foremost, we clicked on the hashtag, and now there's a couple options here. We're in top, but there's also latest, you know, people, photos, videos, okay? And one thing to note before I continue on with top is I brought up earlier that we can include hashtags in our profile, right? And then people can search through our profile essentially using that hashtag. Well, if I use people, if anybody put the hashtag crooked Joe Biden in their profile, they'd actually populate right here. And if I actually go back to, I think Katie Pavlovich was 2A. So let's go to Second Amendment. Let's go to people. And now you can see all the people that have associated with Second Amendment in their profile. You know, NRA, Empowered, this person, Thomas Massey, who follows me. Pretty cool stuff, right? Oh, not bad. Okay. But okay, so that's cool to see. Let's go back to crooked Joe Biden real quickly because it's the thing that's trending today and it's very easy to use. Okay, so at the top, we're at the top right now. So these are where a lot of the eyeballs are. This is where Twitter thinks, what Twitter, well, I should say Twitter's algorithm has determined that these tweets are the top tweets associated with this particular hashtag. And we can use this to our advantage. Okay, so this one was 5 seconds ago. So let's scroll down just a little bit. Okay, so we see one, that's not in English. So we're gonna keep scrolling for just a second. Okay, so we see one right here. Crooked Joe Biden from Joe Villa just said, won't ever trend, but share this tweet anyway. Okay, so what we can do now, let's click on this. And when we click on this, there's always going to be these comments down below, right? We see people that are taking, that are supporting Joy, excuse me, in this endeavor. If we decide to retweet this, this is going to help boost the hashtag, but this is where the conversation is. So now we can start to see the top. One of my recommendations for people, if it fits your brand and if it's the right opportunity, right? So there's a little bit of caveat here, but look at go through the top tweets of the #1 things trending on Twitter and comment down below them and respond to people. And that's a really positive thing to do. And the thing to note is when you are responding to people on Twitter, and this is a good thing to say right now, is that always know that you're writing for, you should be writing for the person that's clicking on the tweet. So if you're responding to someone, you're not actually responding to them, you're kind of responding in a way that makes the observer, the next person looking at this tweet, more agreeable to your side in a lot of circumstances. So just make sure that, when you are responding to people, it's not always a one-on-one conversation, is what I'm saying, is that other people are going to see this. And so let's make sure that when we type our responses, that they are typed in such a way that maybe makes the people on the sidelines observing the tweet much more inclined to be in agreement with our side versus their side, right? Whatever those sides may be. Okay, so that's the top. Again, leveraging those is a good opportunity. Next, we have the latest. Latest is just going to go in terms of recency. So 1 second ago, as you can see, 2 seconds ago, and if I just hit refresh, this is the number one thing trending. So there's probably 10,000 tweets per second right now. But yeah, there we go. There we go. People are really excited that this one is trending. That is for sure. This is the news of the day. And it's cool because we're seeing it in real time, which is awesome. All right, so that's the top. That's the latest. Those are the trends and the trending tab. Now we know how to leverage these a little bit better for our needs. The last thing I want to say here is that oftentimes, before we move on to the next good stuff in Twitter, but this is important to note, is as you can tell, number one, it says hashtag crooked Joe Biden, but on number 3, it just says Ty Lue, right? There's no hashtag there, okay? So if that ever is the case, just use the words that are trending number 1, right? And so, for example, I would not use hashtag Ty Lue in this example, but rather I would tweet and just use the Ty Lue is having a bad day. And that's already going to make it pop up exactly with that centralized conversation. So in a lot of ways on Twitter, a lot of conversations, they're kind of quasi hashtags in the sense that everyone's just using that keyword, AKA in this example, Ty Lue. But yeah, it works effectively the same as a hashtag. And then there's no need to put a hashtag there. And if we hypothetically, this, Ty Lue, let's just say has some thoughts about Biden today, and then hashtag crooked Joe Biden. Well, now this is going to populate in 2 places, right? This is going to populate in the 3rd most popular place on Twitter because it's Ty Lue, right? And it's going to populate in the 1st most popular place because we use the hashtag. And so now you can start to see how we can leverage a couple things to our advantage if they go well together. Of course, I made these things go well together. These don't go well together, but you can see how we can leverage both opportunities to make our tweet just a little bit more powerful, a little bit more of an effect, that's for sure. Okay, cool. But just wanted to point that out, that not everything is going to be a hashtag in the trending tab, and we're just going to use the words that are there. Use those words, you're going to be in the green. That is for sure. I got a question from the chat. It says, you are following a lot of people. In this case, how do you see your favorite and important tweets on your timeline? That is a great question, and we are almost there. And I'll get you to that in just a second, because that is an important question, and we will get there. Okay, so that was Explore. Of course, I'll let you all explore all the other good stuff, but it's not really relevant for our training here today. So we can explore, the U.S. elections. We can explore the news, sports and entertainment, COVID-19, all of that good stuff. There we go. The Explore tab in a nutshell. But let's continue on our journey. And the next place that we are going to get to, just real quickly, is messages. So inside our messages, this is where our DMs are. These are my DMs right now. And for example, I made an ask of this person recently, hey, could you come speak at one of my trainings? And they said yes. All I'm really indicating is that business goes down in the DMs. Do not be afraid to use these DMs, right? One of the bigger things that we can do as well, for a lot of us, if we are just getting started in this journey of ours, is that there's going to be a lot of journalists, a lot of news organizations, a lot of people that we can get their contact information through the DMs of Twitter, right? And there's a couple ways that we can do this. And we can do this from a really good way, a good strategy way that I'm going to show us a little bit later using the search function of Twitter. But let's imagine we already know the answer. We don't have to identify who we're going to talk to. We already know who we want to talk to. Maybe it's Taylor Swift 13, I think it is. Okay, it's okay. We could just, okay, well, let me just make sure I'm saying, I just want to make sure I'm saying this correctly. As we reach out to people in our DMs, short and sweet is the place to be. And if we want to gain the contact information from people, let's tell them that we have news or we have a story or working for a campaign. We want to grab their contact information, and then we grab their contact information through the Twitter DM. My biggest recommendation is actually not to pitch people in Twitter DMs, but rather to pitch people through the contact information that they provide. If that's an email, that's a cell phone, you know, things of that nature, that's going to be a much higher success rate than just hitting people with blank pitches on Twitter. Here's a good example of one. Here's Lauren Boebert running for Congress in Colorado 3. Pretty cool to see, for sure. We can see what she's doing. She's trying to fundraise. These are mass messages that are being sent to my DMs, and they're okay. I don't think it's necessarily a bad mass DM, but it's not going to necessarily get the donation or response that she may be trying to get from me, as if she said, hey, what's your phone number? You know, what's your email, right? And then made a pitch via email or phone number for a donation. She'd probably have a higher success rate, that's for sure. So a couple things to note there. Okay, so that's the DMs. These are the DMs. We're able to compose DMs and write them to all of the good people. And, you know, I actually can't message Taylor, which is too sad. Can't be messaged. Too popular, I suppose. You can only message her if she follows you, I believe, when you're that popular. So it's a little sad. Okay, but the next place is Twitter lists. And let's get to Twitter lists. And Twitter lists are exactly going to answer Ali's question on, I'm following lots of people. So if you're following lots of people, how do you see the accounts that you care about? Well, the answer, quite simply, is using Twitter lists to our advantage. There's a bunch of lists out there to use, and we can leverage them to our ability. And so, for example, I've got one called the Joe Biden campaign. And I also have one called the Trump Team 2020. Let's go ahead and click on Joe Biden campaign for just a second and see what they're saying today, right? Well, now using this Twitter list, and I will create one in just a second, but using this Twitter list, I have 11 accounts that I believe are the speaking pieces of the Joe Biden campaign. And now using this Twitter list, I can absorb all the information in one shot, so to speak, you know, really quick, which is great. So we can see all the stuff, all the arguments, all the points that they wanted to say, you know, all that good stuff. We see a lot of it happening right here. And yeah, that's the Twitter list. And of course, I can go the opposite side. We can go to Trump team. I think I picked 11 people for this one too. And again, here you go. I think Team Trump got suspended on Twitter this morning, as a fun fact, which is probably adding to a lot of things. But yeah, so now I can follow all of that directly through the Twitter list. So that's my recommendation for you. If you feel like Twitter is ever getting too big, or you just want to highlight one specific area on Twitter, then a Twitter list is going to be the easiest answer for you all. And here's how we create lists. We just have to click on lists, and then there's a create list option at the top. Now we can create this list, you know, add a profile picture if we want to add it, create the name, you know, Twitter for politics, you know, political people on Twitter. And I'm going to make this private so it's just not public. And there we go. And now I can start adding people to this list that I believe are political on Twitter. They're automatically going to suggest people. I'm not actually going to add anybody to this list, but that's exactly how we begin creating that list. And we've got some powers using this list that I'm going to highlight to all of us in our final hour, which is just 5 minutes away. We're going to take our last 5-minute break from 3:01 to 3:06, and then we're going to finish this lecture. I'm going to finish on some strategy for increasing your following, utilizing your analytics, and then also using Twitter search and using its advanced search features for your benefit. That all starts in just 5 minutes. We're taking our 5-minute break right now. Awesome. Stop the share for a second. There we go. Dominic just said, why do so many film selfie videos in a car? Why not outside or in a house? I think it's all that relatability aspect. You know, it's like, oh, here's me putting my seatbelt on in a car, just like you do, right? I see cars being used a lot, and they can be used very effectively, that's for sure. I will say, if we want to go that next level, instead of a car, one of my recommendations is kind of those walking shots. You know, if you have just a selfie stick or a gimbal that can stabilize a shot, like you walking and talking, I think that's some of the most powerful video, selfie style video out there right now. I think it's incredible. But yes, so selfie cars work great. And I don't know who started it or why it happened, but I certainly agree that it's effective. And we are going to pick right back up, final hour, the golden hour, where we're going to finish with amazing knowledge, how to build our following, some Twitter tools, some Twitter analytics. I mean, we got a lot of good stuff to talk about here. So let's go ahead and jump right back into it. Let me share my screen with all of you. And we are back in. Okay, cool. So we are in where we just left off. We were in the Twitter lists, and we were able to use these and create these to our needs, which is awesome. And we now have that ability. Okay, so once we have these lists, this is when this website becomes particularly valuable for people. And this is why I want to introduce it right now on the heels of Twitter lists. And the website that I'm going to post in the chat for all of you too is called tweetdeck.twitter.com. And the cool thing, and I've got it on the screen for us all right here. It's in the chat for you right now, so you can activate your own. But we are in tweetdeck.twitter.com. And basically, what this is just a different way to view the many working components of Twitter and the way that works best for us. So basically, all we're doing on TweetDeck is customizing Twitter for our needs. And I really recommend that you do this, or at least have this set up once. So for example, I've got a couple of columns open. We'll create one in a second, but the ones I have open for us right now, we have my notifications, people that have been notified, who are popping up on my notifications tab. And then we have my two lists, which is why I wanted to bring this up. So now in the same place, I'm able to see my first Twitter list of what's happening in the Joe Biden camp today. And I can see my second list of what's happening in the Trump campaign today. And now we can go back and forth and just get a really quick and clean view of what's happening on the world of Twitter. The other big advantage here of using TweetDeck and using these Twitter lists is now I'm not going to be distracted by everything else that's on Twitter, right? You can stay laser focused on your goals the entire time. Really big productivity hack, because it's very easy to see a tweet, it captures your attention, all of a sudden now you're off your game, or your idea has faded. This TweetDeck essentially is just putting the consolidating the important parts that you have described as important in one place. So after those two Twitter lists, I've put in my trending tab, so I can always see the #1 trends on Twitter. And then I can see my user, and I picked the user as myself, so I can see my latest tweet. As we all saw 39 minutes ago when I tweeted, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Okay, so we can always remove and toggle these by using these options right in the right-hand corner. So there's a bunch of them right there. So if I click on one of them, let me just get rid of my annotation just real quickly. If I click on one of them, for example, my user, I can click this down and just remove this tab, click this down, remove this tab. Let's remove this. And now as I want to add things, first and foremost, we go to add column. And when we go to add column, this is what we're able to add into our TweetDeck area. Like I said, this is us choosing to prioritize what we want to see on Twitter. So this is a great time, if you haven't done this before, to set up your TweetDeck. So like I said, it's free. If you have a Twitter account, you'll have a TweetDeck account. It's all one website, roughly speaking. It used to be two different companies, but Twitter bought TweetDeck, and now it's like the same thing. But yes, so we have our notifications up still, but what else do we need? Well, maybe we want the trending tab, right? So we can see now my notifications. I can see the trending tab. Let's add another column, and let's go for, let's go maybe mentions. We can see all the times that I've been mentioned. This guy is really getting after me for some reason, but I'm not going to explore that reason right now. And then, of course, we have our followers, so we can see add a followers column. Let's go ahead and add that column. And we see John right here from the training. Joanne, I believe, is with us right now. But now we can see our recent followers. These are two people who came from 25 minutes ago, which is great. I got a good question. Where is the TweetDeck? Yes, of course. It's just this website. That's all you have to do. So you have to actually type in this URL. It's actually not easily available to you. To my knowledge, I don't think you can get there by just using Twitter. No, you can't. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you actually type out the URL and post it in. Let me post it in the chat one more time for you. But that's all you have to do to type it in. Assuming we're opening it for the first time. We got it right here. All we have to do is log into our Twitter account, and then we're good to go. And then you'll be able to, this will pop up like mine is. And it'll give you a quick tutorial as well. So I'm not going to go through how to set this up fully, but I just wanted to show you some of the opportunities we have setting up our TweetDeck, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, this is all really good stuff. If you have multiple Twitter accounts, this is when it really becomes helpful because you're able to manage all of your accounts in one place. But really wanted to just highlight this, show this as an opportunity. Again, this is going to work for some of us. Others, this may not work for you at all. You just want to stick on Twitter. Totally fine, but had to highlight it, had to show you it. That is for sure. But that's really how we can take our lists and really supersize their effectiveness, right? If we had a Twitter list for all the politicians that represent us, if we had a Twitter list for, our opposition, we could always have our finger on the pulse, so to speak, of what's happening and what's transpiring using Twitter lists and also using TweetDeck to capitalize on the things that are most important to us on Twitter. Great. Okay, cool. So those are a couple things. The next thing that we're going to move on to is more. So there's a couple of things in here. First and foremost, we've got topics. Under topics, it's going to be the topics that Twitter thinks are relevant to us, topics that we follow. Next are moments. It's really, roughly speaking, following the same thing. It's going to follow the top Twitter moments. And then from there, we have Twitter ads. Inside Twitter ads, I'm not going to spend too much time here, especially because Twitter is going to stop has already stopped political advertising on its platform. So for a lot of purposes for activism, we're not going to necessarily advertise on Twitter. Now, I will say, you get someone to retweet you or you pay someone to retweet you, that's going to be the moral equivalent of paying for a Twitter ad. So it's not to say that you can't politically advertise on Twitter, but you can't pay Twitter to politically advertise anymore. So I said I'm not going to really hit advertising too much, but one thing to note, just from a theory perspective and also just from a rough numbers perspective, it's going to cost you more money to advertise on Twitter than Facebook. It's going to cost, you're going to be able to, your typical cost per impression will, roughly speaking, this is going to vary based on so many factors, but roughly speaking, be about $4 to $9 per impression on Twitter. So I'm just saying that it costs a lot of money to advertise on Twitter because there's just a smaller user base. So everyone's just a little bit more expensive to reach, in opposition to Facebook, where there's so many people that it's very cheap to reach people because there's so many more, I guess, picks, so to speak, that would fit the criteria that you've laid out. On Twitter, there's just naturally going to be less of them. Okay, so that is Twitter ads, just as from a rough sketch. We can't do political ads on Twitter, but we could pay someone to retweet us. So that's just a hint at maybe some opportunities, using the DMs, reaching out to an influencer, grabbing their information, and then pitching them with a good opportunity. Probably be a win-win in there for somebody. But next place I want to take you is analytics, Twitter analytics. And here we go. Let's go ahead and click on analytics. Okay, so my analytics are abysmal because I don't tweet very much these days, like I said earlier. I really tweet to keep my Twitter account alive for these classes, and that really is about it these days. But this is the basics of your analytics. Again, to get here in your sidebar, we just click to more and then analytics. Just more than analytics, that's going to bring us right here. We can always also get there by always typing in analytics.twitter.com. And if we're logged in, it's going to take us to this page, much the same. But there's a lot of relevant information here. First and foremost, as you can see, it's a good just top-down level of how you're doing on Twitter, right? This empirically tells me that I'm tweeting much less than I normally do. Far fewer people the size of a small city are not being able to be exposed to my tweets because of my lack of tweeting. Not many people have visited my profile, and then I've lost 79 followers, which makes sense because I'm not tweeting. I mean, why follow me if I've got nothing to say? Some of you may be following me and you'll unfollow me later, and I'll still be following you, but it's okay. I'll never leave you. I'll never leave you. Okay, so as we can see here, we can start to see the people that some important notes. It always breaks down by month. So we're in October right now. You can see my top tweet, America is a republic, not a democracy. You can see my top mention, how we can advertise on Twitter, and of course my top follower for the day, for the month. And we had Family Research Council follow me last month. We had Chanel Ryan follow me the month before that, Thomas Massey, and then go on and so forth, right? I always think it's really interesting to see the top follower, to be honest with you. I think that's pretty cool. But there's some information here beyond this is basically the screenshot of the homepage, right? The gist of it. Are we doing better or are we doing worse? But where we can drill down just a little bit more is if we click over, and there's some more information under more, but I meant if we click over to tweets, here's where we can start to see what's working and what's not as we tweet on Twitter as a platform. So first and foremost, we have my tweets earned 11.5 thousand impressions over the past 28-day period. And let's go to my top tweets. The best tweet that I had was, "Leaders are made, they are not born. Leadership Institute is training many conservatives today in Las Vegas." We can just pop it up real quick. and see how it went, which means it had the most impressions, had an engagement rate of 5%, which means that 5% of the people of the impressions engaged with the tweet, which is pretty cool to see. Now, here's where it becomes valuable for us is, for example, my second most popular tweet over the past 30 days was, America is a republic, not a democracy. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what they're going to have for lunch. Good quote by Benjamin Franklin, and the world agreed with me on that one. So now I know which way to push, right? Immediately I know what I should say next, or at least I know mentally. Hopefully you start to know as you start to look at your analytics and your following, right? The number one thing I can double down on is my constitutionalism. I can double down on my conservatism, and I bet you that my engagement is going to be pretty similar to the last tweet that I posted along those lines, right? Instantly indicating what was working. And now I know what worked with the most engagement, and I can continue to follow that engagement down the path, right? Even just expanding on this one from October 8th, America is a republic, not a democracy. Now, what if I just created a couple series of tweets after this saying, here's why America is a republic, or here's why democracy in its purest form fails, right? Things of that nature. And I bet I would still continue to follow that engagement and get large degrees of engagement the further down that path I decided to go. So yeah, again, that's why I really like these analytics. It really tells you how we can kind of pivot, so to speak, or start to push towards the issues that matter most for people. That is for sure. I got a quick question from John. John just said, what does protecting a Twitter account do? Can anyone access your old tweets? What about Wayback Machine? Okay, so there's a couple things there, that's for sure. So first and foremost, what does protecting a Twitter account do? Yeah, so you can always set your account to protected. You can always do that through your account settings. And we didn't get to our account settings yet. Let me go to more settings and privacy. And then if we go to security and account access, manage your account security. Actually, I think it's actually privacy. There we go. Yeah, so here in your privacy center, we're able to, first and foremost, take additional actions with muting and blocking people, but we're also able to change our settings of our profile. So my account inherently is a public account. Your account must be public if you ever want to get that blue check mark, first and foremost. But if you've chosen to protect your account, I was trying to find someone who has a protected account, but I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. Then it's kind of like on Instagram, and I don't know if that's a good comparison for a lot of people, but just in case, I'm going to continue saying it. On Instagram, if you haven't followed someone and their account is locked so you can't see their photos, that same principle applies on Twitter. So unless you have to choose to follow them, and then they have to accept your follow request, and then you're able to access their account, right? All the information is a little bit behind a wall, so to speak. I think on Twitter specifically, this is a place where I think it's not ideal to ever have your account protected, to ever live in that life, simply because it will immediately make sure that this account doesn't reach, the big leagues, so to speak. It can't be retweeted by anonymous accounts. Other people can't find you easily or engage with you easily. And it puts an incredible limit on your ability to be seen by the world. That's for sure. And so what it does is it does effectively remove your stuff from the public, in the sense that only people that follow you with a protected account will be able to see and engage with your tweets. However, only people that follow you will be able to see and engage with your tweets. So if you have 20 followers and your account's public, well, you're probably not going to get too many more followers, right? You might get 25, might get 30, but it's going to be tough to get to 200,000. That's for sure. So my general recommendation is not to have a protected Twitter account, but that's what it does, basically. It basically just puts a big lockbox on the whole thing, and it's pretty effective, that's for sure. The next question, can anyone access your old tweets? Generally speaking, yes. And the other big thing to note, and you mentioned it here with the Wayback Machine, but one thing to note is once you press send on Twitter, there is likely some website out there right now, or some computer, so to speak, some bot that is every second that's screenshotting Twitter, just in case somebody decides to post something and then they decide they're a little too drunk, so they decide to delete the tweet. But the fact that they sent it, someone screenshotted it somewhere, and that'd probably be my assumption on most instances. So generally speaking, yes, people can access your old tweets. Of course, if your account is protected, then you're going to be in that circumstance where maybe not very many people can access it, but some people can. And then what about the Wayback Machine? People can go back in time to view old tweets and old archives. And that actually is going to be the next direction that I'm pushing in this training, which is awesome. And kind of highlights some cool features inside of Twitter. The next place I want to teach us all about is Twitter Advanced Search. Let me just pop it up really quickly. Okay, so I just did, and let me copy and paste this into the chat as well. But I wanted to show this as an opportunity because I think it's pretty valuable, and especially when it goes to looking at your previous history or looking at the history of others, especially people that may not be on your team. But this is Twitter's advanced search feature, and this is really powerful stuff, right? Because we can search all of Twitter since Twitter's inception for information about somebody, right? For example, I could type in my name, right? This exact phrase. It has to be Stephen Rowe, right? And if I go Stephen Rowe and I click search, now Twitter's going to search. First and foremost, it finds me up here. But now we can see all the times that I was associated, or the word Stephen Rowe was associated. Power enemy, Stephen Rowe says hopes. I don't know who that guy is, which is pretty interesting. There's a lot of this guy. There's some guy in FIFA. His name's Stephen Rowe too. He's just the worst. But now you can see here. So some cool options that we have inside of it. Oops. Come back to Twitter Advanced Search. But we can go for all of these words. We can go for this exact phrase, any of these words, none of these words, and these hashtags, right? Okay, so another example, another use case where this could be really, really powerful for people is the example of, let's say that I want to get on the news, right? Let's say that I want to appear on the news, or I want to get my article or my op-ed placed by a journalist or a media person. Well, let's go ahead and use this exact phrase. And in this example, let's say that I want to appear on the news. So typically the person's role is called editorial producer. Of course, with just a couple of Google searching, you can figure out what the title typically is for a person in the role that you're trying to contact, right? So you see editorial producer. So this is typically the person that makes the decisions of what's being produced on television every single day. Okay, so their profile, if they have editorial producer, and I now search using Twitter's advanced search feature, is going to pop up, which immediately means this is going to be a list of warm leads, right? So let's go ahead and hit search. Let's see what pops up. So you have editorial producer, and then we're just going to click over to people. So let's go ahead and click on people, and here we go. All right, now we've got the gold mine, right? Now we see that this is the editorial producer for CNN-EE. I'm actually not sure what that is. Emmy winner entrepreneur, pretty cool. We see New Day. We see the editorial producer for CBS News, for NewsHour and Show the Circus. This person is with the lead. I think that's Jake Tapper on CNN. This person is with ABC. This person was with CBS This Morning. I mean, you see Cuomo Primetime, CNN editorial producer. I mean, I can continue on and on and on, but you absolutely see the effectiveness of this, right? Now I have this entire list, right? Hypothetically speaking, let's imagine that I want to pop up on CNN. Well, let's go to Kitty O'Keefe, and let's go ahead, and you notice immediately, if you can see this, she doesn't really have that many following and followers. So if I reach out to her through her Twitter DMs, it's a pretty large chance that she's going to see it at the very least, right? She'll probably respond. But let's click on somebody else, maybe someone a little more popular. You see this one has 2,000. Okay, this was pretty good. But now we can go ahead and we can message her. So we have JRose CNN. That's her Twitter handle. So now we can tweet, at her directly, or we can, take this to a private message, create a new message, type it in. Oh, she can't be messaged. She has a more closed setting, which is actually very ironic because this is the one person that's letting me down on this one. But it's okay. We can still tweet directly at her, which is great. I think I have to follow her before I message her, and then I'll be able to message her through DM. But we can see immediately this warm list of leads we can use through Twitter. So my urge and plea for all of you is to use Twitter's advanced search feature for your benefit on activism, whether it's getting on the news, whether it's getting a certain reporter to cover a story. But if you ever need to look for a particular class of people, there's never been a better opportunity for that than using Twitter's advanced search feature, that is for sure. And finally, just going back to that one more time. Oh, I accidentally copied it. I copied and pasted over here. Okay, one sec. Copy, paste. So click enter. Okay, but I clicked this exact phrase, but we can really look for pretty much everything, right? So we see hashtags, we see that we can look for people that actually have none of these words. We can actually look for specific accounts, and we can actually add a date range to it. So only look for people between this time and this time, right? Your search feature on Twitter has never become more powerful, and now you have a great power, that is for sure. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. All right, so let's talk about increasing your following now. Let's talk about growing your following on Twitter, which is a good thing to do in general. So the technique that I'm about to share with all of you is called the piggyback technique. It's called the piggyback technique because I named it that. And to my knowledge, nobody else is actively teaching this. So I believe I'm the only one. If I'm not, I mean, please feel free to teach these to other people, share this with other people. But I think I was here first. I named it first, piggyback technique, feeling proud. Okay, anyways, let's continue on. So let's just start with our president, for example. Tweets a lot, very popular, 87 million followers on Twitter, probably will be over 100 million before the end of the election cycle, that's for sure. But we see a couple things here. Let's go ahead and click a non-rally tweet. Let's just go for a plain text tweet. Hold on one second. He's been doing a lot of media today. All right, so okay, let's see one where he makes an opinion really quickly. Wow, there's been a lot of tweets today, more tweets than I could ever send. Let's just use this one. It's fine. Nobody has ever done as much for Iowa as I have ever done for Iowa. Not even close. All right, so here's what we can do. The piggyback technique is that we find someone that we like. In this example, we're going to pretend that's Donald Trump. It may be the case, it may not be the case. And then we're going to find someone we don't like. And this could be Donald Trump, right? Depending on where you are, who you are, that good stuff. But we're looking for those two people, and then we're going to build a list of people in those categories. And then we're going to comment when they tweet, right? Because this happened 8 hours ago. This has 50. Let's just actually, we're just using a different rally. Let's use this rally. This one came out 3 minutes ago. Okay, let's click this one. 3 minutes ago, we see this person already has 17 likes, 10 likes, 6 likes. This is 123 likes. This came out 2 minutes ago. This person is very famous for doing this. This is a prime example of the piggyback technique. Miss Krenstein here. This person is very anti-Trump, which means that you post in favor or you post against, depending on this being your winner or your loser category. But the fact that you commented is going to input you where the eyeballs are. The president tweeted, which means that people are going to be looking at this comment section, which means that we can start shaping the narrative of this comment section. And especially when it comes to politics, my biggest ask of a lot of people is actually to start shaping these comment sections a little bit better. So for example, let's scroll, and this will probably be negative predominantly, right? But then it's up to us as activists to make it either positive or negative for the candidate, campaign, and cause of our choice, right? But here we see, if we were on, let's imagine we worked for the Trump campaign for just a second, we see that this is not good, this is not good, this one's not good, this one's not good, this one's not good, this one's not good. But here we go, we have one that's positive right here, best president America's ever had, winning for America. See, there we go, is a positive thing. But that's what's shaping a lot of people's reality of how the world works. Unfortunately, I wish people didn't do this, but it's such the case that the comments on a tweet really do shape a lot of people's opinions. So let's imagine that we're picking on someone else. Let's pick on AOC, someone a little less popular. We're at 9 million followers right here. So we're getting a little less engagement. I think with the Trump's Twitter is the exception where you're going to see like 5,000, 10,000 likes on a comment to his tweet. I mean, it really is powerful stuff to utilize that Twitter thread specifically. But let's imagine, like I said, we pick someone we liked. Let's imagine that we pick someone we don't like. Hypothetically speaking, let's imagine that I don't like AOC. Of course, I picked this at random. I'm a 501c3. So there we go. Totally random. Just randomly stumbled upon this account and pretending that I don't like it. Okay, so we see, let's pick on one where she actually made an opinion real quickly. We have one right here from October 12th. When politicians use faith as an excuse to pass and uphold laws that seize control of people's bodies, but not guarantee them health care, feed the poor, shelter the homeless, or welcome the stranger, you have to wonder if it's really about faith at all. Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for that information. Okay, so we see some valuable comments right here. Here's one that we see instantly, though. Jesse commented, and again, I did not pre-screen these, so I don't exactly know what's about to pop up, but let's read it together. It is by our works and faith, not by government, that help those in need. God is not government. We as people, as followers in Christ, are there to help those in need, not the government. Our taxes are not tithes. As for people's bodies, what about the baby's body? Okay, pretty good response. And again, this is an example of piggybacking, right? You found someone you disagree with and you added a valuable comment in opposition. And this is a well-worded or well-stated opposition. And of course she's a verified account, so we're gonna have a little more engagement from that as a whole. But this person has, well, I don't know how she's verified. Oh, she's a congressional candidate. That's how she got verified. Okay, but she has some followers, which is good, but this is one of the bigger pieces of engagement. And this is something that we're seeing in this class right now, which means that there's a large degree of effectiveness here that's transpiring. And this brings me to another point. Actually, let's pick on Jesse for just a second here, because another big question I get, and we'll walk back into grabbing followers in just a second, but another big question I get is, Steven, all right, you got a blue check mark. How did you get that blue check mark? How do they get their blue check mark? How do I get my blue check mark, right? Okay, so first and foremost, Twitter's approval process, it was way different in the past than it is today. So, and when I did it in 2016, 2016, there was actually a form, there was an application process where you could apply to be verified, right? And then you had to meet the criteria. Twitter assumed you're an important person. They give you the blue check mark, right? That process is no longer the case. So you can no longer apply to be verified except for two instances. The two instances are, number one, that you are a candidate for public office, which is exactly why Jessie got a blue check mark. She has not a lot of followers, not a lot of following, but if you are running for public office in America, and I think for Canada as well, they will automatically verify you. You just have to reach out to, let me type in gov@twitter.com, and they will absolutely throw you that verification upon some, you fully verifying that you're running for public office, right? I think you have to provide some documentation, the things that you typically would have anyways because you're running for public office. But to be honest with all of you, one of the quickest ways to get verified on Twitter these days is actually just to run for office. So it might be an encouragement for some people who are thinking about it in the first place, but there we go. The next big way that you can get verified these days is only if Twitter views you as an important person. For example, this time last year was the second presidential debate. During the second presidential debate, there was a man named Ken Bone who asked a question. He asked a question, the internet blew him up. They loved his question. They wanted decency in America, all that good stuff. And now he has a blue check mark because Twitter said, wow, this person's really something and has a Twitter account, now gets verified. So those are really the big two ways that people are verified on Twitter these days. Unfortunately, they have, I want to say that, let me say this the right way. Okay. It is unfortunate that the Twitter approval process that was of the past has been canceled, but I will say, I was at a meeting with Twitter in DC about 7 months ago now, and they have informed me and a couple other conservative leaders in the movement that are in this digital realm that they are trying to move towards a process where everybody can be verified. It's a lot like, what's a social media site you can get verified on easily? Maybe not easily, but on Instagram, for example, you can apply to be verified. And then if you meet the criteria, you're gonna get that blue check mark on Instagram. There's a YouTube, you can be verified. I was thinking, yeah, that's absolutely the case. A lot of dating apps, you can just verify yourself these days, that type of stuff. But they want it to be much less important, which is a good thing for most people because everyone can get this blue check mark soon. But for people who have it, it may mean a little bit less as a whole. So that's just a quick note on verification. I wish it was different. I can't control it. Basically, Twitter is being Twitter. I don't know what to say sometimes when they choose to make the actions that they take. But that's just a rough thing on verification. And if there's any other questions there, definitely let me know. Alice just said verification on Google. Oh, Elena, excuse me, just said verification on Google Business. Alice just said Parler, I got verified on. Yeah, Parler is a great social media app, great social media platform. It's not as big as Twitter by a long shot, and even Twitter is not as big as most of the really big social media platforms. So it could be valuable for sure, but it depends on what you're trying to do ultimately. But Parler could be fantastic. I've also seen, some other good additional social media sites like MeWow, and there's another one, Triller, and then I'm seeing a couple other ones. But ultimately, it just depends on what we're trying to do on the platform as a whole. That is for sure. Okay. Wow. And also, just as a quick note, for those of us that saw this, this happened on Twitter. So this is actually a pretty cool political lesson. So um, Steve Scully, who's supposed to be the third presidential debate moderator, was asking Anthony Scaramucci for advice on Twitter, or at least sarcastically commented on Twitter that something was happening. And it just said that C-SPAN actually suspended him indefinitely because he lied. He said his account got hacked, which is why it responded to Scaramucci. It did not get hacked. That was actually him commenting. He used to work for Joe Biden, not a fair moderator, whatever. It's totally fine. Okay, let's push past that. Let's come back to growing our following on Twitter. Okay, so the next big thing about growing your following on Twitter, if you really are serious about growing on this platform, the rule of thumb is that you must tweet at least 10 times per day, which seems like a lot, but it gets easier and easier with time. But if you really want to grow on Twitter, you've got to be posting a lot. Now, here's the thing. Now, it doesn't always have to be, this tweet from the beginning like we saw before, but rather, we can throw in some retweets to that, or we can throw in some piggyback comments to that. But your total strategy, if you're trying to grow on Twitter over time, organically, must be that you have to engage at least 10 times in 10 different places on Twitter, whether that's your tweets, whether that's retweets, whether that's commenting on places where people are. That's going to help you grow fundamentally the best. You have to be on the platform to grow on the platform first and foremost. That is for sure. Yeah, I just got ouch, 10 a day. Yes, no, I'm serious about this too. And I recommend more. And this does get better with time. I mean, this is a skill that's learned over time. But we have a tweet. We had a tweet that we sent out. We can send out another one right now, and it's going to be great. And that's 2 of the 10. That's already taken care of, So it does happen pretty quickly. The other big things we can do to offset this growth is I've got 2 websites that I really recommend to people. First and foremost, the website that I recommend is Buffer, and the second one is called Hootsuite. Buffer is a great scheduling service. And again, if 10 tweets a day seems like it's pretty heavy for you, then this is my recommendation, is that we schedule our content ahead of time. We stockpile our content. Now, I always like to compare this to like photo shoots. And this is something that women do extraordinarily well and that men do terrible at. And it's that you can stockpile your content and then release it on a schedule. That same principle applies for Twitter, right? So there's going to be some things where you're reacting to the day, right? You're checking the trending tab, you're maximizing your what's happening now, because that's what Twitter is as a platform. But there's also your evergreen content, and that's what we can sprinkle in over a schedule over the course of time, and that's going to make everything flow just a little bit better. That is for sure. That is absolutely for sure. And the second one is Hootsuite. So Buffer, I like Buffer simply because it's just pretty basic. It's very clean as a website, which I really enjoy. And it's also free as a free version. Hootsuite also has a free version. It's just it's a matter of layout. There's really no real preference here as to which one works better. They both work the same, just preference on like Coke or Pepsi at this point. But those are 2 great scheduling services that can help you. Alice just said, I guess migrate from Facebook to Twitter would be the goal. And Bailey said, Twitter finally added a native scheduling option too. Yes, that's very true. Yeah, and like we were showing earlier, when we tweet, we have that schedule option right here. We can schedule this tweet as we'd like to, and we can actually view our scheduled tweets that are ready to go. Now, I've not noticed a big difference between using a scheduling service and actually using Twitter's native scheduling in its tweet, a difference in engagement or anything of that nature. But one thing to note, and let me go over to Leadership Institute, and we might be able to see it here, because we do use a scheduling service. And let me click on one, for example. Okay, here we go. Yes, so as you can tell, we use Hootsuite. And when you use a third-party scheduling service, it's going to display in your tweet. So you can see it kind of right here. It says Hootsuite Inc. Because that's the scheduling service that we've used to display the tweet. Now, if you use Twitter's organic scheduling service, that would not appear. And it's really up for debate as to whether that's a positive or a negative. I've not noticed a tremendous difference of engagement, like I said earlier, either way that you go. But I know a lot of people actually want to get rid of that Hootsuite Inc. And because it makes it feel a little bit more corporate, and it feels much more organic and much more natural when you're just scheduling throughout the Twitter platform itself. But definitely wanted to highlight that. That's certainly something that's kind of happening there for sure. And that was a good thing to call out. absolutely. Okay, so let's continue on in Twitter and let's continue on in growing our following. Okay, so we're going to just expand on this piggyback technique for just a moment, just a little bit further, because we already found the people now, and hopefully you have that. You have your people you like, and you have your people you don't like, and we're going to now comment when they tweet, and hopefully it's going to be, if people that I like, if the people I like, and let's imagine it's the president for a second, it's very easy to say, I stand with you, you know, American flag, you know, all that stuff, and your engagement is going to grow. It's going to be a very big thing. And conversely, you probably have to think out an argument when it's someone you don't like and they tweet something that's opposite of your beliefs, but it's always important to do. Again, one of the bigger things that we're doing from an activism perspective, from a political perspective, when we leave these comments, is we're leaving these comments for the passive viewer, the person who's actually just scrolling Twitter, and they see our comment against or they see our comment for, and that hopefully solidifies their worldview, or it offers a, you know, wow, I didn't think of it like that moment for them. And that's really a sign of good activism, really changing. The other big thing I want to note here as we're working through the piggyback technique is actually replying to comments, right? And I clicked on the Denver Broncos for some reason. Here we go. Let's click on this one. Okay, so the big thing to note here, and I don't see it happening too much in this tweet, but I'll just say what my rule of thumb here is when you are in a Twitter comment section, I would spend very little time responding to comments. I always typically say that we don't get into Twitter arguments, right? One response is a clarification, or it's our gist. We're going to leave it up there. It's our 2 cents. And then 2 is getting into an argument. And I recommend not getting into arguments on Twitter. We can be much more effective with our time by scheduling more tweets, commenting on other influencers' posts and statuses, etc., than getting stuck in like this fight between this random Twitter account, right? And especially if this Twitter account doesn't have a face to it, it's like a stock photo, or it's a burner account, so to speak, is what we will call it, then there's just no sense in continuing that conversation. So even if they're being mean to you, even if they are really egging you on to respond, and you know that you may have the right answer and they're wrong for X, Y, and Z reasons, my general rule of thumb is we don't want to waste our time with arguments. We want to spend our time as effectively as possible, which means that builders can build much faster than destroyers can destroy. So let's just build a new tweet. Let's just continue forward. Let's post more in different places. And if it's a positive reaction, if people are responding to us positively, saying, yes, I'm glad you brought this point up, you know, things of that nature, well, then we are going to give them credit, right? Everything from a quick emoji, like a fist bump emoji, or like a thank you emoji, or saying and typing out the word thank you, that means a lot. And it's going to be a pretty large conversion rate as to responding to comments, and then that person in turn chooses to follow your account. So there's quite a bit of giveaway there, a leeway there, which is really nice. If it's a positive reaction, respond to people. If it's a negative reaction, 1 response is a clarification, 2 is an argument. Don't get into arguments. And that's how it's going to really clear up your mind, because as we do this piggyback technique a little bit more, what's going to happen is a lot like my notifications right now, in the sense that, okay, oh, thank you. Oh, cool. Well, thank you, Sophie. I appreciate that. We'll like that. Okay. One thing that happened here, as you can see in my notifications, is when I got tagged in this tweet, now my DMs, my notifications are going to be just boggled down with that stuff, right? And that's going to happen if your tweet is super successful, or if it's getting a lot of engagement, right? And that's what I'm saying. Don't fall in the weeds there. One of the bigger things we can do is move on to the next topic, to the next situation, and asking yourself that famous question from the president in West Wing: what's next? Right? Because that's what we have to be focused on. What's next? What's next? What's next? Because it's happening now. If you posted it last week, you posted it last hour, you posted it 5 minutes ago, that was 5 minutes ago. I mean, Twitter's happening now, right? And that's the mentality that we have to have if we want to grow on Twitter. So now we know we're posting at least 10 times per day. Some of those are piggybacks, and now we know how to respond to those comments. Let me know if there's any questions that remain along those lines. Okay, so next, inside of Twitter, inside this amazing platform of ours, a couple more just smaller things that I think are important to note. One of the bigger things is that as people, let me find a different way to say this really quickly. With my Marco Rubio moment to pause my brain. Okay, I remember what I wanted to say. Okay, so as people are increasingly cautious of of censorship on Twitter. Censorship on Twitter, obviously the hot topic of today and beyond. I think that there is one way that we can always counter censorship online. And it comes from this article. Ironically, Jim Jordan was right there, but as you can tell, I've already had the article up. Here we go. And here it is. And I think this is a really important question. As if more censorship continues to occur, this is the solution to that censorship. It's that we want to own our audience, right? Because when we're playing on Twitter, that's not our audience. That's our rented audience. That's Jack Dorsey's audience. When we're playing on our website, that is our audience, and we own the space and we own our audience. And that should be our efforts where possible. So if you just have a Twitter account, I actually would, first of all, I've been pushing the website idea on you probably for the better half of an hour now, but even an email list or something of that nature can be really beneficial as a whole. But here it is. Here's the article. This was what happened, yesterday when Twitter banned, or excuse me, blocked the House Judiciary official Twitter account. And this is what they did. Twitter censored our last link. So we put the article on Jim Jordan's website. Nice check, but we won't stop. And now we still have the article and people can still see the information on the website. And so even if something ever becomes banned or censored on Twitter, there should always be an external platform, an external source that we can link to so we can still utilize Twitter, but then push the traffic to a place where we control the conversation, where moderators can't slow us down, all of that good stuff. One of the best things we could do in 2020 and beyond is begin to own our audience, especially amid these censorship concerns, because this is only likely going to continue to happen. Maybe it's not specifically towards conservatives, maybe it is specifically towards conservatives, but censorship is not going to go away, that's for sure. And the best thing we can do to counteract this is to have our own space on the World Wide Web. The better we have this space, the more effective that we're going to be, again, as a whole. And we don't have to worry about that censorship concern. So that's the next thing on censorship. The next big thing that I think is really interesting using Twitter is this what's happening area. So this is different than your trending tab. This is going to be similar to your For You at the beginning. This, typically speaking, is still going to be augmented towards you. Again, you can see in Virginia, my election news and updates, because I live in the great state of Virginia. I don't know if it's the great state of Virginia, but it's a good state of Virginia. I think it's a Commonwealth. So there we go. But again, it always brings you back to the For You page. I just really want to make sure, again, as we're getting started with Twitter, don't necessarily get caught up in the For You and the what's happening page. Where the real action is, again, is by going to explore and then clicking trending. When we click trending, that's where the biggest conversation is. That's where the most eyeballs are. And then we can utilize those to our best advantage. That is for sure. But that's one of the bigger things, again, is most people will stop at that For You page, think this is what the world is talking about, and it's really only what Twitter thinks that you want to see. And they do a good job at guessing, but at the end of the day, it's not going to fulfill our needs as a whole. The next big thing is coming back to tweet structure and how we can structure our tweets. This is another big thing. Okay, so we did that quote. It was pretty short. Let's create a different tweet. Let's create a tweet that says, let's talk about the American flag, because the American flag is super easy for me to talk about. Okay, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Wait, let's just do America is. And it's not even close. God bless the American flag. Let's lowercase that b. There we go. Okay, cool. And then, maybe I have the emoji, American flag. Okay, cool. So this is pretty small. This is pretty small, but I think it's really important because a lot of people, especially as they begin their tweeting, is what we tend to see is like these wall texts. So I can maybe talk about, the American flag is special and I really care about it. I'm just writing out words right now. Hold on a second. Because it is deeply symbolic of the freedoms offered to everyone that are necessary and just. Okay, that was just scramble. But what we tend to see when we tweet for a lot of people is you keep it all on one line. One of the best things we can do is really start breaking this down. So again, this is pretty much gibberish, but we see the American flag is special, right? Well, then let's press enter right there. And then now we can get rid of that and I really care about it because it's deeply symbolic of the freedom. And then maybe down here we can add some American flags. But this is the spacing that we can utilize in our tweets to maximize our area. Now you'll see this on Twitter a lot, where people will, let's just press this is technically 280 characters. So when this tweet goes out, as a quick example, well, then it's going to fill up that much space on the timeline. And so we've got a bunch of different tactics like that that we have at our disposal when we are actually composing our tweets. So when you are creating yours, always feel free to space things out. So even just adding this one space, God bless the American flag, that made this way more readable, way easier to scan. And let's remember, when people are scrolling through Twitter, that they are scanning, they are not reading. So we just need that, and then we can go ahead and click send. I'm actually not going to send this tweet, but I just wanted to show that syntax one more time of what effective one looks like. For example, we can look at Donald Trump Jr., who just tweeted this out. Even us looking at this on the screen right now, maybe it's important, maybe it's not, but it's a wall of text. And I actually would discourage this in most circumstances. Of course, when you are an influencer of this size, you can kind of break some rules. But for us on the smaller side of things, adding some spacing and making it much more scannable will help deliver this tweet as a much more effective tweet to the masses. That is for sure. Awesome. Okay, cool. A lot of good stuff that we talked about here today. I'm feeling pretty good about everything that I covered. I just want to make sure I didn't forget anything. I don't think I did. And I don't think anybody else has any questions, so we're doing okay. So lastly, we'll just pick up what were Mike Pence pickup lines, because that popped up and that was trending earlier. Okay, wow. Yeah, we're actually gonna look at those later. That was actually, okay, live Twitter feed, right? Okay, so let's hop back out of Twitter. Let's hop back into the presentation really quickly. Hopefully that all made a lot of sense. And hold on one second while I pop open the right presentation. I did not. Hold on one second. Okay. Well, my presentation didn't save after I made those edits to it, so I'm just going to come back to this one. I normally have a really good clapping screen of like it all finishing up, but we're at a good stopping point, so I feel like we're in good shape. But I want to walk through some couple things before I let you all go. A couple other housekeeping things before we finish up today. So first and foremost, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them right now. But